That day, my husband brought back a young lady. She was well versed in poetry and prose. Just a line or two from her lips was stunningly brilliant. Her fame as a talented woman spread throughout the capital. She was a precious pearl, while I was but a fisheye. He was the cold one. He was the one who wanted to divorce me. Yet 4 years ago, that young man who knelt in the winter rain, letting mother break 3 rattan canes on him, still insisting on marrying me, that was also him. My husband fancied this young lady. I could tell these past few days. She was radiant and talented, bold yet charming. She dared to visit pleasure houses, to exchange verses with scholars, and when her identity as a woman was revealed, she stunned everyone present. Her poems about the moon made the Grand Secretariat scholars yearn with admiration, praising her as free-spirited and proud. Her poetry reflected who she was. She made all the young ladies of the capital seem like caged sparrows, timid and petty. So when the old madam asked whether my husband had stayed in my quarters these past few days, I lowered my head, and she looked at my belly with quite some disappointment, when my nephew Shuyuan, whom I had raised since childhood, only clung to her, feigning illness to avoid me, complaining that I was boring and strict, when my husband avoided my expectant gaze and placed a divorce paper on my desk. I truly envied her, even felt jealous of her. Since his return from the northern wastes, I waited for 3 nights, only to have him personally deliver the divorce papers to my room. My husband, whom I had longed for day and night, Shuziyi, sat down perfunctorily and took a few bites of the dishes. "I heard you went to see mother today?" "Yes." I carefully poured wine for him. The old madam had reminded me to be prepared. She would definitely send Shuziyi to my quarters today. No wonder! Disgust flashed in Shuziyi's eyes. She scolded me, telling me not to favor the concubine over the wife. I didn't. I don't wish to say anything more. Shuziyi took out the divorce letter. Xuanmeng said she only wants one man for one lifetime. I had long anticipated this day, but I didn't expect it to come so soon. If you didn't still have feelings for the past, why would you come to Chuangyue's quarters tonight? I still wanted to see a trace of reluctance in his eyes. He seemed to have drunk too much, his mind not quite clear. I hurried over to support him. His body was burning hot. Realizing something, he angrily swept the soup to the floor. I stepped back in fright. "Husband." He advanced toward me step by step, forcing me to retreat until I had nowhere to go. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he gripped my chin, forcing me to look up at him. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with a lust I knew well. "Zhou Chuangyue, you've even learned to use such tactics." Zhou Chuangyue hadn't seen each other for half a year, and we've already become this distant. We fell in love at first sight, yet 4 years of marriage couldn't compare to the novelty brought by the Miss Xuanmeng he spoke of. I looked carefully at the man before me, sword-like brows and starry eyes. Emotions rarely shone on his face. He was indeed the Shu Ziyi I had loved for 7 years. "Do I need to help you undress too?" I trembled, my lower lip quivering, unable to speak, and lowered my head to undo my outer garment. The moon-white robe I had carefully chosen lay crumpled on the ground, embroidered with the beauty plum blossoms of our betrothal. He had ridden 2 fine horses to death, bringing that plum branch from the northern wastelands just to make me smile. That pink mandarin duck intimate garment was something I embroidered late at night, my cheeks burning as I sewed. Once, when we were intimate and whispering, he playfully snatched it away to examine it closely. My ears burned with embarrassment as I tried to grab it back, but I fell for his trick and ended up in his embrace. My tears fell, drop by drop. The September wind blew through the window lattice, and the tenderness of the past cut at my heart. Like ice blades, layer by layer, I heard my trembling voice. "Since your heart already belongs to another, why must you humiliate Chuangyu like this?" Shuziyi let out a cold snort and turned his back. "If you had seen her, you would know how disgusting you are. Having stayed in the inner chambers too long, you've even stooped to using such tactics." "Zhou Chuangyu, don't you remember what you said back then? You said you were afraid of having children. You said to wait a little longer, and I agreed to everything. Now that she is here, suddenly you're not afraid anymore." All I remember was the intense pain throughout my body, as if I were covered in festering sores that made him desperate to avoid me. I clutched tightly at the plum blossom hairpin from when we were betrothed, its sharp floral patterns piercing my palm until it was a bloody mess, yet I couldn't feel any pain. Even the cheapest prostitute in the pleasure quarters could receive some tenderness, but in the darkness he hastily pulled up the blanket and went to sleep, as if utterly disgusted by me. My heart felt like it had a gaping hole torn through it, with the night wind blowing straight through my body. If only I had known. If only I had known. If only I had known your heart had changed. I would rather you had died on the battlefield. Why did I foolishly wait for your return, praying day and night before the Buddha, begging that if the swords and blades on the battlefield were blind, let them all fall upon me instead, and not harm my beloved in the slightest? I curled up, biting my lower lip, and cried through the night. Everything changed, starting from that day. News that the general had won the battle and was returning had already spread throughout the capital. I had started preparing the general's residence to welcome him 3 days prior. In the morning, I personally watched over the pigeon soup on the stove. Upon hearing that his carriage had entered the capital, I hurriedly put on my makeup, hesitating over the jewelry in my vanity, until even my maid Elfeju saw through my thoughts and teased me. Just wear that beauty plum blossom hairpin from your betrothal. The master will surely be smitten. From afar I spotted the general's mount, the snow-white silhouette of Joyexi, and the servants at the gate were already cheering that the master had returned. I saw my husband, whom I've been longing for day and night, Shu Ziyi. He seemed to have lost some weight, probably from the pressing war situation and overwork. He dismounted from his horse, but didn't look at me. Instead, he gently lifted the curtain of the carriage. A girl jumped down from the carriage eagerly, her water-blue skirt blooming in the air like a morning glory, vibrant and radiant. Being naughty again. My husband looked at her tenderly and gently tapped her nose. The girl stuck out her tongue, looking completely unconcerned. "Husband!" The words I was about to say stopped, because this girl came bouncing toward me like a little rabbit. "So, you're the general's wife." The girl looked me up and down with a grin. "I've heard Ziyi mention you, although you two were gossiped about for secretly pledging your love. Well, you're both victims of the feudal system." What does feudal system mean? Did he tell this girl about our past? I felt a bit uneasy inside. Good, good, good. It is good that my son is back. You've gotten thinner and darker. The old madam couldn't help but shed a couple of tears. Your elder brother passed away early back then. Fortunately, Ziyi is still capable, just like your father. Mother, instead of sitting inside properly, you're standing at the doorway, as if our grand general's manor can't find a proper place to talk. Concubine Jo smiled, the beauty mark at the corner of her eye becoming even more charming. She smiled as she helped the old madam inside. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, the sisters-in-law and maids surrounded the old madam and headed toward the eastern warm pavilion. "Husband, I've stewed some pigeon soup, waiting for. I have some matters to attend to with Miss Xuanmeng these next few days. No need to wait for me." I froze, ignoring the ache in my heart, lowered my head, and softly replied, "Okay, Z, she really is as virtuous as you said, not even jealous." That Miss Xuanmeng came closer to examine me carefully as if she'd spotted some novelty. "Pretty, too. What a pity, though. Only knowing how to cling to a man. How pathetic." "I told you long ago. How could any of them compare to you?" I stared blankly at Shu Ziyi, a sudden feeling of humiliation clouding my heart. Zhao Yi sensed my emotions and nuzzled my face with its neck. Zhao Yi lived up to its name, pure white all over, not a single blemish. When galloping at night, it was like lightning illuminating the darkness, hence the name Zhaoye. Back then, I was the one who delivered Zhaoye. It had a fierce temperament and was hard to tame, yet it only listened to me. At that time, Shu Ziyi was still a snotty little kid who got kicked into a mud pit by Zhouye and ran crying to the former general. The late general was a loving father. He couldn't stand Shu Ziyi pestering him, so he told him a shortcut: go win over the little girl who feeds the horses. That was me. My father was a horse trainer at the stable, and I was his only daughter, Zhou Chuangyue. When Shuzi saw how obedient Joya was to me, he was green with envy. He tried every trick in the book to win me over, but I was stubborn and proud, never cared much for gold or silver. It was quite a challenge for Shuzi. He racked his brains to find rare trinkets, glass beads, little figurines woven from mandrill fur, captured sabers, all just to get me to finally agree to let him touch Zhaoya's coat. That is when we formed our bond. It seems unbelievable, a horse servant's daughter and a general's only son secretly pledging themselves to each other, overcoming all the barriers of status to finally become husband and wife. But that is all in the past now. When I woke up, I saw myself lying on the bed, tear stains still wet on my face. I can see myself. I panicked and reached to check the breath of the me on the bed, only to find my fingers were rough and calloused. I hurriedly got out of bed and ran to the vanity mirror, only to see Shuzi's face reflected back at me. Did we swap souls? I frantically pinched my own face. It wasn't a dream before I could think it through. I heard Hongyu scolding Elfeju outside. Why haven't you woken Madam yet? Today's the 15th. She needs to get up early to pay respects. Do you want those people to laugh at Madam? The master is inside. How would I dare to shout? I hurriedly shook Shuzi awake, feeling quite strange looking at my own face. Husband, get up quickly. We still need to pay respects to the old madam. Probably because his eyes felt sore, Shuzi rubbed his eyes. When he saw me with his face calling him to get up, even someone as composed as him nearly fell off the bed. I couldn't care about anything else, only feeling that not paying respects to the old madam was the most important matter. The old madam had disliked me since the first day I entered the household, and those sisters-in-law were sharp-tongued too, leaving few peaceful days throughout the year. This matter must not alarm others. Shuzi was the first to react. Just recently a sorcerer was beheaded in the capital for spreading heretical nonsense. By the time we got used to our bodies and walked awkwardly to the East Warm Pavilion, a roomful of womenfolk was already waiting around the old madam. The old madam looked at me with a face full of affection, making me somewhat uncomfortable, then scolded Shuzi. You're becoming more and more precious too. Yesterday I heard the maids gossiping, saying the madam threw a big tantrum last night and flipped the table. Shuzi, wearing my face, didn't know how to respond, just kept his head down without a word. This feeling of watching from the sidelines was very subtle, like an out-of-body experience. I wanted to say a few words to help him, but the old madam affectionately pulled me to sit beside her, stroking my hand. Let mother have a good look at you. I had never seen such a loving expression before. Back when I wasn't yet married into the family, I was already used to her looking down on me, mocking me coldly for being unworthy of her son. Knowing my humble origins and respecting her as Shuzi's mother, I had always swallowed my grievances in silence. Mother, yesterday it was your son who accidentally knocked over the table. How could Chuangyu have such strength? She worked hard yesterday too. Serving one's husband is a woman's duty. What is there to call hard work? Concubine Zhou said with her pregnant belly, her tone neither cold nor warm. The Shu family had 2 sons. Shuzi's elder brother died from convulsions after falling from his horse in autumn, leaving behind a 4-year-old child, Shu Shuyun, the posthumous child in Concubine Zhou's belly, and several troublesome concubines. Concubine Zhou was called Zhou Ruyu from a declining noble family in Jiangyan. Back then, Shuzi's elder brother rode through Jiangyan and caught sight of her selling wine at a tavern, a glimpse of her fair wrist, and a beauty mark beneath her eye full of allure. Within days, she was carried through the door in a small sedan. She used to have a forthright personality, and was close to me later. When the old madam handed the household management to me, the trivial matters of the inner quarters gradually drove us apart. She repeatedly instigated the old madam, either criticizing my origins or my disappointing belly, all the while eyeing my ring of household keys. Zhou Ruyu was yearning for the power to manage the household. Shu Ziyi stood there awkwardly. Just as I was hesitating whether to help him out of this situation, crisp laughter rang out from outside. "Who is laughing out there?" the old madam asked. "It is Miss Monkey and the young master flying kites." The maids giggled, covering their mouths. "Help me outside to have a look." The winter sunlight outside was lovely. My little nephew was laughing happily, chasing after Miss Xuanmeng, clamoring to fly the kite himself. As he ran, he looked up and saw Xu Ziyi wearing my face. Frightened, he plopped down on the ground and cried out, "I don't want Auntie, she is mean, she hit me." Concubine Zhuang seized the opportunity and hurriedly pulled him into her arms, cooing sweet nothings to comfort him. Concubine Zhuang had no children of her own. She wished she could snatch Xu Yuan to raise in her own quarters. Every time Xu Yuan had his lessons, she would either send him snacks or coax him to go out and play. You've never been a mother, so how would you know what is appropriate if you push him too hard with his studies and ruin his health? What then? Children this age should be playing. All this studying is turning him into a fool. That Miss Xuanmeng also chimed in. It is called letting his nature run free. The old madam indeed shot Xu Ziyi a cold glance. If you don't fail his dead mother and truly teach him well, I'll thank the gods and Buddha. But if you can't have children of your own and take it out on Xu Yuan, I advise you to give up that thought. Everyone hurried to calm her down. Xu Ziyi shot me a cold glance, and a hint of bitterness welled up in my heart. Xu Yuan's mother died from a difficult childbirth when she gave birth to him. On her deathbed, she entrusted this child to me. The men in our family earned their glory and titles on horseback. Now that times are better, I only hope he studies and earns a title through the examinations. I came from a humble family. My father was a schoolteacher who studied his whole life without achieving anything noteworthy, which gave them something to laugh about all these years. Xiangyue, I've always been proud by nature and never bothered to get along with those women in the inner quarters. I only consider you a true friend. I know your character and how you treat others. From now on, help me watch over him. Don't let him neglect his studies or go astray. Tell him that studying and earning a title through examinations is worthwhile. Basin after basin of blood was carried out. Her face was as pale as gold paper, barely any breath left in her. She clutched my hand tightly, begging me to promise her. But Xu Yuan has a stubborn temper. I've seen this kind of mischief countless times. He used to fake illness to avoid studying, telling a whole basket of lies. Everyone swarmed in. Some went to fetch the doctor. Others brought basins and poured water, all scrambling to show off and curry favor in front of the old madam. The old madam herself was startled by this commotion and turned around to scold Xu Ziyi. Everyone made a show of trying to hold back the old madam, but from where I and Xu Ziyi stood, we could clearly see that little brat Xu Yuan spitting at Xu Ziyi behind everyone's backs and making a face at him. Xu Ziyi had never encountered such a mischievous temperament before and roared angrily. Xu Yuan, Xu Yuan immediately lay down on the ground, deciding not to move at all. Mother, Xu Ziyi was about to explain. Slap. A heavy slap landed on Xu Ziyi's face, and I was stunned. That slap was meant for me. The old madam's heart ached for her grandson. Her face covered in tears. You rotten-hearted whore, you want to kill him so you can scheme against our Xu family. Look at what you're wearing and eating, which of it wasn't given to you by our Xu family, ungrateful beast. All those books you copied must have gone straight into a dog's belly. Xu Ziyi was stunned, seemingly unable to believe that his loving mother would say such vicious words, momentarily speechless. Zhuangyue, your younger brother has come back after all. No matter how much you resent mother on normal days, you should at least put on a filial appearance now. Concubine Zhou continued to fan the flames. Adding chaos to chaos, the steward rushed in from outside, saying someone from the palace had come to deliver an edict. Apparently the master was to return to the northern wastes. I glanced at Xu Ziyi, who seemed to still be reeling from that slap. It wasn't until I knelt to receive the edict that Xu Ziyi realized the gravity of the situation. This concerns the life and death of the Xu family. These past 2 days, he couldn't even spare time to go to the brothel to please Miss Xuanmeng. We searched through all the supernatural storybooks, but couldn't find a way to switch back. Finally, the last day arrived. It rained the night before departure, a winter rain, dense and drizzling, pattering on the roof tiles. We sat facing each other, the short 3-chi desk between us like the Milky Way. The candlelight danced on his face, his eyes glittering with firelight, as beautiful as on our wedding night, making my heart skip a beat. Back then he was only 19, and he wouldn't even kick the bridal sedan door, making others laugh that he'd surely be henpecked. From when I stepped off the sedan to entering the bridal chamber, he tossed the wedding ribbon to the ground, strode forward and held my hand tightly, never letting go except during the bows to heaven and earth. The wedding matron said this wasn't proper, and the relatives there for the celebration covered the children's eyes. "You're hurting me," I complained, holding my reddened wrist. "I was afraid you'd run away if I let go." He lifted the red veil, firelight dancing in his eyes, his youthful gaze both shy and fervent. "That nightmare I told you about. The one I fear most you left. You rode away on Joey. No matter how I called you, couldn't hear me. I couldn't catch up to you. I lost you. It is as if the 7 years between us passed in the blink of an eye. That persistent and resolute young man at some point let go of my hand, leaving me alone, separated by this distance that feels like worlds apart. Vice General Yang Zhaoxi, a son of a noble family, unruly and reckless. Despite my repeated guidance, he remains quite defiant, frequently insubordinate, but still usable. His words pulled me back to reality. Yang Zhaoxi. I remember when Xu Ziyi and I got married, he had also come along with the old madam of the Duke's residence. He was only 15, then, yet seemed modest and courteous. Quite the little gentleman. 4 years have passed, and he has become unruly and reckless. Strategist Yuan Ke, fancies himself the reincarnation of Zhuge Liang, conservative in nature, never takes risks, trustworthy. Scout leader Shoya, never serious, always joking around, yet blessed with extraordinary talent and luck can. He thought for a long time but couldn't come up with anything, and finally smiled. Can bicker with him to pass the time. When he spoke of these brothers who'd been through life and death together, the corners of his mouth curved up slightly. It had been a long time since I'd heard him tell me about his affairs. Back then, I rode alongside him across the northern wastes. We talked about everything, but now I'm confined to the inner quarters, and the trivial matters of the general's household have nearly made me forget those times from my youth. Ever since I married into the Xu family, you haven't told me about these things for so long. Sometimes when I dream of the Laughing Corpse Mountain in the northern wastes, the troublesome beast-taming arts of the Shao tribe, and the mountain ghost rumored to dwell in Laughing Corpse Mountain. The moment I said it, I realized my mistake. The books say, after all, that is not a woman's proper place. He didn't want to listen to a resentful woman complain, so he changed the subject. Laughing Corpse Mountain is rumored to have mountain spirits. I used to think it was just a legend, but then I saw one with my own eyes. His eyes lit up when he talked about the mountain spirit girl from Laughing Corpse Mountain. I thought of the rumors outside about how he met Miss Xuanmeng, and my eyes dimmed. It is Miss Xuanmeng, isn't it? He was somewhat embarrassed that I had seen through his thoughts. These past few days, because of the body swap situation, he rarely went to the pleasure house to support Miss Xuanmeng's performances, instead having his attendants deliver messages to ease his longing. You don't need to feel uncomfortable. You and I are no longer husband and wife, just bound by these bodies. I smiled, my eyes stinging with tears. When I made a secret marriage pact with you and eloped on Lantern Festival, I had already anticipated today. When we were together, Shuzi's father readily agreed, but my father refused no matter what. He had been a widower for many years, and I was his only daughter. He refused to let me marry into the high gates of the general's manor. The people inside all have eyes only for wealth and hearts full of snobbery. How could you possibly understand their schemes? Ziyi will protect me. My father sighed repeatedly, but I was so immersed in love that I wouldn't listen to anything. On Lantern Festival, I secretly went to meet him and pledged my life to him. My father was so angry he cursed me for eloping shamelessly. A woman who is formally betrothed becomes a wife, but one who elopes becomes a concubine. Do you understand the consequences? He ordered me to kneel before my mother's memorial tablet. His face ashen as he raised the horsewhip high. I felt I had done nothing wrong, so I simply tilted my head up and waited for him to hit me. After several attempts, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He sighed, threw the whip aside, and sat alone in the corner with his head bowed, crying. That Joe Bull who commanded respect at the horse ranch, that father who had spoiled me since childhood and gave me everything I asked for, seemed to have aged decades overnight. The next day, Shu Ziyi knelt at my family's doorstep, enduring 3 days of winter rain. My father finally relented, sighing 3 times in a row, which counted as tacit approval of this marriage. Shu Ziyi treated me well, even when the old madam broke 3 rattan canes. He insisted on giving me the position of his legal wife. Back then, I truly believed that vows of eternal love would never change. When I brought up the past, Shu Ziyi looked uncomfortable and said nothing, making me seem like a bitter old nag full of grievances. "Does your face still hurt?" I looked at the slap mark on his face and changed the subject. "How do you usually attend to mother? Why would she lose her temper so badly? How do I treat her, because she is your mother? I honor her as if she were my own." Concubine Joe says, "You're usually disrespectful and lack filial piety." "You believe Concubine Joe, but not me, is that right?" I looked at him quietly, but he suddenly felt guilty. Mother is getting old, so it is inevitable that she doesn't hold back her tongue. After we switch back, you go apologize to her, kowtow to her, she just has a harsh mouth, but she is soft-hearted, calling me an ungrateful beast, and that only counts as not holding back her tongue, and I have to kowtow and admit my fault. Just one thing from me, watch out for your brother's concubines. Can the women of the inner courtyard be more dangerous than the swords on the battlefield? He sneered. I'll secretly inquire about how to switch our bodies back in the capital. You just need to stay alive on the battlefield. Maybe by the time you reach the northern wastes, we'll have already switched back. We sat facing each other in silence, with only the rain beating on the withered lotus outside and the lamp wick crackling. Look how loving our master and madam are. Hangyu and Elfeizu, keeping night watch, were chatting outside. That Xuanmeng girl, a total shameless slut, singing in brothels, entangled with both the crown prince and the prince. I heard she is even hiding some man of unknown origin in her brothel room. Elfeizu was still young, just indignantly speaking up for me, her voice unconsciously getting louder and louder. Our madam is such a good person, yet she has been secretly crying these past few days. Shu Zi's face turned ugly, and he was about to get up and beat Elfeizu, but I held him back. After divorcing you, I'm taking Elfeizu and Hongyu with me. They've been by my side since childhood, and speaking up for me is simply the bond between master and servants. If you were to punish them, it would chill their loyal hearts while they bear my reputation. Su Ziyi, this is my only request after 4 years of marriage. He hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. The day of departure was a cloudless, sunny day. The Miss Xuanmeng he spoke of didn't come to see him off, that is, me wearing his appearance. I heard she just opened a new pleasure house, having a grand opening promotion today. Shu Ziyi wanted to go out, but bearing my identity, confined to the inner quarters, he couldn't go. He was very disappointed and restless. Fortunately, a single line from Miss Xuanmeng, if love between 2 hearts is destined to last, why must they be together day and night? Swept away all his unhappiness. Zhao Ye was extremely excited, nuzzling my neck repeatedly. I swung onto the horse, and Zhao Ye happily raised her front hooves. I smiled and stroked her snow-white mane. The coat was glossy and smooth. Shu Ziyi had taken good care of her. Shu Ziyi said sourly, I've been through life and death with her for 4 years, and I've never seen her fawn over me like this. 10 days on horseback, heading north the whole way. Past Liuyan Pass lay 200 or 300 li of wasteland, nothing but withered grass and dying willows as far as the eye could see. Not a soul in sight, only a few scattered relay stations shivering in the cold wind. The setting sun was red as blood, its lingering glow coating the small border town with a layer of withered desolation. In the distance, the snow-capped mountains shimmered with golden red luster, flashing with a cold yet scorching chill. This was where I grew up. Zhao Ye neighed joyfully, and my eyes grew warm. Just then, the sentry on lookout at the camp entrance called out, It is Zhao Ye. It is the Ochre General's banner. the vice-general, and the general have both returned. Vice-general, the Yang Zhaoxi, that Xu Zi spoke of, the one who defied discipline and repeatedly challenged his superiors. I turned to look back and saw only billowing dust on the horizon and a flash of striking ochre red. Only when the billowing dust rushed before my eyes did I finally see his face. Cold light gleamed upon iron armor. The young man on horseback held a silver spear, its blood not yet dry. A vermilion ribbon bound his ink-black hair high up, a sharp ponytail trailing behind. At first glance, his entire figure bore only 3 colors: red, black, and white, much like the towering, unreachable snow mountains in the distance, sharp yet wild. When I saw him 4 years ago, he was still just a child. Now he was already a vice-general. Yet before I could speak, the silver spear in his hand was already sweeping toward my face with the wind. The spear thrust out swift as a swimming dragon. A crisp clang rang through the air, and in the next second that silver spear had stopped at my throat, barely halting in time. Seeing me frozen, he suddenly smiled with a hint of mischief unique to youth. "General doesn't even smile? How boring." He nonchalantly turned his horse around and headed back to camp, seemingly deaf to the thunderous welcome General Shu behind him. But I felt he wasn't just playing around. In that instant, I clearly saw in his eyes killing intent. This was probably far beyond mere mischief. From afar, I saw 2 men standing on either side of the tent entrance. The man on the left wore a black crow feather cloak, with fox-like eyes and thin lips pressed into a half-smile, carrying the cunning and shrewdness of a street rogue. The man on the right wore a plain-colored robe, yet was draped in a heavy blue fox fur coat. Unlike the calculating man beside him, his phoenix eyes seemed to carry sorrow and compassion. The northern wastes were freezing cold, yet he still fanned himself with the feather fan in his hand. A trace of Xu Zi's memories surged up. It was the scout captain Shoya and the strategist Yuan Qi. That night, the liveliness of the daytime welcoming banquet had already died down. During the feast, young Zhaoxi had clashed with me multiple times. I raised my cup to toast him politely, but he wouldn't even lift his head. He even claimed he felt unwell, and without waiting for my permission, slammed the tent flap and stormed off. Little did I know, the moment I fumbled my way into the tent in the dark, young Zhaoxi followed right after and punched me. While I was still dazed, he kicked me in the back of my knee, then grabbed my collar and yanked me up, forcing me to look up at him. In the darkness, his eyes gleamed like a wolf's. His face was cold, teeth clenched as he spoke word by word. "You still divorced her, didn't you? All for that whore. Things weren't peaceful at the general's manor either. You're getting more and more precious these days." The old madam leisurely sipped her tea. Low birth, poor family, and no manners marrying Ziyi was already your blessing. Xu Ziyi had been kneeling on the ground for half a shikan already, wondering why this woman's body was so weak. After just a short while, her knees felt sore and weak, sweat beaded on her forehead, and the sweat stung the old wounds on her palms with a dull ache. The wounds on her hands never seemed to heal. There were many clothes to wash. The old madam had ordered it specifically, to temper her temperament and teach her filial piety. No one else was allowed to help. Those clothes were merely washed and hung to dry, then taken down once dried and washed again. He thought of that night when he forced her, and Chuangyu had gripped the hairpin tightly in her hand, stabbing until it was a bloody mess. But it was also her own bitter fruit to eat, using such dirty tricks to scheme against him. "You're also disappointing. I had that wine sent over, yet you still couldn't keep Z by your side," the old madam sneered. "Didn't you used to play some pipa and know some veterinary medicine? Why don't you learn from Miss Xuanmeng and keep your husband?" Xu Zi's head shot up upon hearing this. "What wine? Oh my! Does little sister still think she is a pure maiden?" Auntie Jo stood with her belly protruding, a flash of jealousy crossing her face. "Back when brother doted on you, of course you didn't know." So the wine was bestowed by mother? Then that day the servants in her own room have sticky fingers. How could she possibly teach Xu Yuan well? Auntie Zhuang cast a mocking glance at Hong Yu, who lowered her eyes and said nothing. You will kneel here and reflect on your mistakes. In half a shichen, when the tutor comes to teach Xu you needn't attend him any more. No matter how mischievous Xu is, he is still a member of the Xu family. It is not your place as an outsider to discipline him. From now on, Xu will be in Auntie Zhuang's care. Auntie Zhuang could barely hide her delight, readily agreeing and promising profusely that Xu Yuan would become accomplished and would be filial to the old madam in the future, coaxing the old madam into beaming with joy. The womenfolk crowded around the old madam and dispersed in twos and threes, while Shu Ziyi still knelt on the ground. He dared not defy mother's command. It must be that Qiangyu's temperament was too headstrong before, and being from a rural background, she didn't understand the rules, which displeased mother. That is why mother would seize upon this as leverage to make things difficult for her. He knew his own mother well, the loving mother who had doted on him in every way for over 20 years. When had she ever given him a hard time? If she loved him, wouldn't that love extend to those he cared for? How could she make things difficult for Zhou Qiangyu without good reason? Madam, you're just too devoted, worrying too much. Seeing Shu Ziyi kneeling, the wet nurse who had served her mother for years sighed and tried to help her up. These men never showed any filial piety for over 20 years, but once they marry a wife, they immediately become the most devoted sons. They go on about how their mothers had it hard all these years, and if the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law quarrel, their own mother is always the kind one. The whole family gangs up against the young lady. Who can the young lady share her grievances with? Shu Ziyi's ears flushed. Isn't marrying a wife supposed to be about being filial to parents? The old madam raised the young master, but she never raised you for a single day. Where does filial piety come in? The wet nurse smiled. What you're doing isn't filial piety, madam. It is just loving the house for the crow on its roof, all for the young master's sake. Shu Ziyi felt she had nothing to say and sighed. Madam, please sit for a while. Have some hot tea. Eat something to fill your stomach. This servant will go keep watch for you. The old madam went to see her grandson and won't be back until lunch. I just feel unwell. I don't have any appetite. Shu Ziyi shook her head. Even if you feel unwell, at least have a piece of pastry. Shu Ziyi waved her hand and only drank a few sips of hot tea, but soon he regretted it. The rules for dining in the manor were many. When the old madam ate, the daughters-in-law had to stand and serve her. Shu Ziyi held the teacup, feeling dizzy. Whether intentional or not, the old madam noticed his trembling hands and ate even slower. Finally, he felt his eyes burning, his waist aching like it was soaked in vinegar, and the teacup in his hands seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. He stumbled and collapsed. The maids were about to help him up, but the old madam gave a light cough and set down her chopsticks, and no one dared move. When Shu Ziyi opened his eyes, he was already lying in bed, his lower abdomen aching terribly. Madam is awake. Eunuch's son from the palace sent someone to inquire. It is the end of the year. End of the year. What about it? Shu Ziyi was about to get up when he suddenly felt very uncomfortable down below. Madam's monthly has come. Hong Yu smiled. That is good. You're not pregnant. Not pregnant? Is that really something to be happy about? Before Shu Ziyi could think it over, he suddenly remembered the matter with Eunuch's son. End of the year? What does that mean? Madam must have lost her wits. Eunuch's son is here for his year-end squeeze, of course. Eunuch's son was called Sun Kubao. True to his name, relying on his influence before the emperor, he often extorted money from lower officials. Shu Ziyi despised this kind of spineless eunuch the most and never gave him a pleasant face whenever he entered the palace. Not giving him anything. How can madam say such things? Hong Yu panicked and covered Shu Ziyi's mouth. The master has a straightforward temperament and has always disdained forming cliques for personal gain. You used to say yourself that the officialdom is full of twists and turns. How can one stay clean alone? The master offended those civil officials before. And if it weren't for you, madam, constantly bribing those eunuchs to put in good words for the master, before the emperor, how could things have gone so smoothly? She bribed them for me. Shu Ziyi was stunned, having never heard Xiongyu mention any of this. The master has always looked down on those who bully others by flaunting their power, but the more despicable someone is, the less you can afford to offend them. Hong Yu sighed. Madam, please decide. This year, the master won 2 battles and received quite a few rewards. Who knows how much jealousy and resentment that is stirred up? Shu Zi just stayed silent. How would he know how to bribe anyone? I'll go get the account books for madam. Right, there are also account books. When Hong Yu ordered the maids to bring over a table stacked with account books as thick as a city wall, Shu Zi instantly felt his head double in size. These are the accounts for our general's manor for the past half year. Does madam want the ones from the first half of the year too? No need. Shu Zi was hopeless at scholarly work. Back then, his father would stand behind him with a whip forcing him to study, yet he couldn't get through a single word. He would read Guan Guan Ju Ju as Guan Guan Ju Ju, which made his father so furious he kept cursing. Just look at Chuang Yu reading the Book of Songs at 3, reciting the 1,000-character classic at 5, learning the pipa at 7, and by 8 she could already treat livestock. Your father should ask that girl Chuang Yu one of these days how to deal with a useless beast like you. What did he say back then? Father, since you like Chuang Yu so much, after I marry her, she and I can teach your grandchildren together. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Shu Zi opened the account book. To his surprise, the income and expenses, as well as social dealings, were all recorded in perfect order. He hadn't known that, besides the pipa and medicine, Chuang Yu was also skilled at arithmetic. The handwriting in the account book was neat and elegant. Whenever he received rewards, there would be small annotations circled in red with tiny characters. Those 2 little characters, Ziyi, made his heart inexplicably soften. It was almost like she was praising him, making Shu Ziyi unable to help but curl his lips into a smile. Yet she had never told him about these trivial household matters. The letters she sent always said everything was fine and told him not to worry. This account book was filled with countless tedious affairs that would wear anyone down. It must have been hard for her to handle everything so flawlessly these 4 years. Back then, I suffered quite a bit over these accounts. Hong Yu carefully ground the ink. Aunt Jo dreams of managing the accounts, but who doesn't know she wants to move silver to her own poor family? If madam made even the slightest mistake, she'd dare to throw tantrums and cause scenes. Madam cares about face, but she is a shameless thing. And then there is Aunt Zhuang. Their room is a mess of bad accounts, and every maid and servant is crafty. Did Aunt Jo often give her a hard time? But he had seen Aunt Jo himself, a delicate beauty raised in the Jiangnan waterlands, appearing gentle and docile in temperament. Due to the impropriety between a brother-in-law and sister-in-law, he had never looked at her directly. He had only heard her acting coquettish with mother before, her voice soft and sweet later. When elder brother took Aunt Zhuang as a concubine, she was soon cast aside and forgotten. Why would Aunt Jo, out of nowhere, make things difficult for Chuang Yu? The twists and turns of this inner household, even he found himself a bit confused now. Hong Yu, go fetch some silver. Shu Zi suddenly thought of something. And find a reliable servant boy. Yang Zhaoxi looked down at me from above. His movements were strangely fast in the blink of an eye. The dagger from his lower back was already pressed against my neck. I was so frightened I didn't know how to respond. She is more intriguing than Chuang Yu. Yang Zhaoxi sneered again. A loose woman who'd take any man fickle as water. She came from the direction of Laughing Corpse Mountain. How do we know she isn't a spy for the Shao tribe? She is already preparing to return to the northern wastes. Then let me warn you, General, you'd better not die in the northern wastes. The way Yang Zhaoxi stared at my throat. He looked exactly like a leopard ready to pounce, prepared to kill me with a single strike at any moment. Otherwise, I can't guarantee whether some hungry wolf might pop out from somewhere and just by sheer coincidence happen to run into Miss Xuanmeng. I touched my neck, still shaken. Yang Zhaoxi was the young master of Duke Yang's household. A nobleman's legacy lasts but 5 generations by the time the title passed to him. It was already the 3rd generation. His family wanted him to pursue scholarly honors, but who knew that while he was doing perfectly well with his studies, he silently ran off to fight in the northern wastes. He fought his way up to the position of vice-general through military merit before anyone recognized him. Young Master Yang was famous in the capital for being gentle and good-natured. How did he become so unruly and violent after just a few years? I carefully thought over Yang Jiaoxi's words. All the noble men in the capital were in love with Miss Xuanmeng. With his temperament being so peculiar and difficult, he must have loved her but couldn't have her. Hindered by General Xu Ziyi's status outranking him, and trapped in the northern wastes unable to see her, love turned to hatred, and he gradually developed inner demons. How pitiful. I cast him a pitying glance, only to see him put away his dagger and undress, preparing to sleep. The flickering candlelight illuminated his high-bridged nose and thin blade-like lips. He was bare-chested, his robes loosely hanging at his waist, long hair cascading like a waterfall. His muscular torso was covered with wounds both old and new, yet they couldn't hide his explosive strength. He untied that red hair ribbon and wrapped it around his wrist like a treasured possession. Noticing me watching him, he gave me a contemptuous smile, looking down on me. So he is a little madman suffering from unrequited love. How pitiful. I touched my neck and couldn't fall asleep no matter what, always feeling like Yang Jiaoxi was looking for a chance to make a move on me. Outside, the moonlight was bright and clear as water. As soon as I lay down, I couldn't help but wonder, over on Xu Ziyi's side, is everything going smoothly? I drifted off to sleep in a daze, dreaming either of Yang Jiaoxi turning into a wolf child, sharpening his claws with his back to me, or of Xu Ziyi placing the divorce papers in front of me. I simply gave up on sleeping and went outside the tent to take a walk. Being in the same tent as Yang Jiaoxi, even with a curtain between us, still made me feel uncomfortable all over. The moment I lifted the tent flap, the soldier at the entrance hurriedly hid whatever was in his hands, looking very suspicious. "What are you hiding?" "General, I'll never dare do it again." He hastily knelt on the ground, and that plain silver hairpin was clearly visible. It is my fiancée's hairpin. She is waiting for me to go back and marry her." The young man's gaze was clear and bright. I was puzzled in my heart. It was just a hairpin. Why was he so frightened? What the military forbids most is homesickness, for it shakes morale. Don't let me see it again from now on. Imitating Xu Ziyi's manner, I coldly dropped that sentence. But unexpectedly, the young man's face dimmed, and gritting his teeth, he steeled himself to throw the hairpin into the fire brazier. Fortunately, my eyes were sharp and my hands quick. I snatched it away. "I meant for you to hide it well," I sighed, placing the hairpin back into his hands. "I didn't tell you to throw it away. Why are you so literal-minded? The sun must be rising from the west today." I turned around. Yang Jiaoxi had woken up. He leaned casually against the tent, every bit the frivolous young dandy who loved watching a good show. The great general has a human side now. "Great General, it was this lowly one who made a mistake first. I shouldn't have put you in a difficult position." The young man kowtowed several times in succession. He was only 14 or 15 years old, yet such a small matter had scared him out of his wits. Just like Yang Jiaoxi at 15 back then, he did things in a fluster too. On the day of my wedding, he bumped into my sedan chair at the banquet, causing me to stumble and fall. He panicked so much he didn't know what to do. It was I who helped him up first. He timidly apologized to me, calling me Sister Qiangyu over and over, just as terrified. Now he is 19, and he has learned to pretend to be mature. I sighed. "Don't be afraid. Keep the thing, and treat her well." The young man was stunned for a moment, then nodded excitedly. "Thank you, General. I'll keep it safe. I'll definitely keep it safe." Womanly compassion. Yang Jiaoxi sneered coldly and turned back to the camp tent. Seeing his dismissive attitude, a nameless anger surged up in my heart. I didn't know if it was because Xu Ziyi originally harbored dissatisfaction toward Yang Jiaoxi, So this body was also easily angered. I held back and didn't lash out, only wanting to keep the peace and get through this period, waiting for Shuziyi to say he'd found a way to switch back. But I didn't expect that the days wouldn't be as peaceful as I thought. Winter comes early in the northern lands, and by October there were rarely any sunny days. Snowflakes fell as large as mats. Yuan Qi waved his fan, his gaze solemn. The Shao tribe will surely make a move in the next few days. But fighting in this kind of weather, our chances of winning are too low. The days ahead won't be peaceful. Yuan Qi instructed Shoya to stay on high alert for night patrol, and sure enough, a few days later in the dead of night, they caught a spy that day. I had just laid my head on the pillow when a soldier came to report from outside, saying they'd caught a spy. The spy had firestones on him and was sneaking around toward the rear of the grain supplies. Fortunately, he was discovered by the patrolling soldiers. All the officers and soldiers stood ready for battle, listening as the strategist Yuan Qi pondered for a moment, then looked at me and said, "What does the general think?" I thought of the time in the rear courtyard when concubine Zhuang's maid stole jewelry and hid it in Elfeizu's room to frame Elfeizu for theft. Hongyu and I simply played along with their scheme and made them suffer a silent defeat. I tentatively asked, "Played along with their scheme. It takes about a quarter hour for the fire to spread." Yuank was such a shrewd person, he probably already had a foolproof plan in mind, just waiting for me to say it. He smiled slightly. "Tie that spy up tight. Line up for roll call. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Stand by until the third watch." "I'll go start the fire." Shoya volunteered to set the blaze. With the new year approaching, the Shao tribe is having a hard time. They probably can't wait any longer. Yang Zhaoxi pondered for a moment. This storm had just passed when another one arose that Miss Xuanmeng came to the northern wastes. She also brought news that Chuangyu had been locked up for using witchcraft to frame concubine Zhou. The old madam had passed down an order forbidding anyone to give her food. Concubine Zhou, with her pregnant belly, cried like a pear blossom drenched in rain, the beauty mark under her eye looking so pitiful. The old madam was so angry she smashed her teacup, and the flying porcelain shards cut Xu Zi's face. Hongyu was tortured beyond recognition, yet she stubbornly insisted that Zhou Qiongyu was innocent, that Elfeizu was too young to know anything, and that it was she herself who hated concubine Zhou, and so hired a Taoist priest wanting to kill both mother and child. Xu Zi looked at the doll that had fallen in front of him, its belly swollen, with 17 silver needles densely pricked into its stomach. He didn't know why Hongyu insisted. It was her own idea to seek out the Taoist priest to frame concubine Zhou. How could a maidservant come up with such a scheme on her own to go seek out a Taoist priest? My birth date and time were never known to anyone else, but because I was close with her before, I poured my heart out and told her many things who would have thought. Concubine Zhou's face was covered in tears. "If you want to harm me, just come at me directly. Why curse the child in my belly? Just because you can't bear children yourself, must you curse both me and my child?" She comes from the countryside. She knows plenty of these lowly tricks. Perhaps she used such methods to seduce the general back then. The old madam was so angry her whole body trembled, and Xu Zi felt that no matter what he said, he couldn't explain himself clearly. Was he supposed to say that he and Changyu had swapped bodies, and he went to a Taoist priest to secretly inquire about a way to swap back? He truly didn't know where that doll came from, nor how concubine Zhou knew he had ordered Hongyu to seek out a Taoist priest. "Lock her up. No food allowed. Let her live or die as fate decides." The old madam's lips trembled, tears still wet on her face, while the maidservants below scrambled about calling for the doctor, fetching medicine, and heating water. Xu Ziyi worried about his mother's health and wanted to step forward to attend to her. But unexpectedly, a fair and delicate hand pressed on his wrist, gently restraining him. Aunt Zhou had her back to everyone, lifting her eyes from behind the tear-stained handkerchief, glancing at Xu Zi, curving into a faint smile, the rouge mole beneath her eye exuding endless allure. "Little sister, do you still want to anger the old madam to death?" Xu Zi was stunned. How could this woman's face change faster than flipping a book? You, my dear, are still too naive. The servants locked Shu Zi in the private prison where Hong Yu lay next door barely breathing, with only a tattered felt cloth barely covering her body. No matter how much the old madam disliked Chuang Yu, she knew that the legitimate wife was Su Ziyi's face, so she couldn't torture Chuang Yu and instead took out her anger on the maid beside her. After this beating, the wounds on her body festered, and she developed a fever. The old madam gave orders that no one was allowed to treat her. If she dies, drag her out and bury her. Whoever dares to plead for her will be beaten to death as well. Outside, the autumn rain pattered down. Shu Zi took off his outer robe and draped it over Hong Yu. Hong Yu was originally a maid in Aunt Zhou's chambers. He didn't understand why Hong Yu would shield him and Lao Feizu. She could have easily pushed the blame onto Chuang Yu and freed herself. With Aunt Zhou as her former mistress seeing her cooperate from within, she surely wouldn't have made things difficult for her. Hong Yu developed a high fever in the middle of the night, and in her delirious state told him to leave quickly. "Madam, please go quickly." Hong Yu didn't say anything. "I know I can't be cured. Madam needn't be sad." She was delirious from the fever, and in her haze began calling for her mother again and again. From her words, Shu Ziyi pieced together the story of a poor family's daughter who had signed a slave contract to support her family. She worked hard to please her masters and secretly saved money, hoping one day to buy her freedom and escape her lowly status. But concubine Zhou found that money and assumed she had stolen it. Clean hands or not, who could tolerate a servant secretly making plans to betray their master? That day she was about to be dragged out and sold off, but was stopped by Chuang Yue. Chuang Yue lit a lamp and went through the old account books carefully, then simply said the money matched the accounts, and Hong Yu was innocent. It was also from this time that Chuang Yue and concubine Zhou became enemies. So that is why concubine Zhou would stir up trouble like that in front of the old madam, making her mother, who already looked down on Chuang Yue, dislike her even more. The rain stopped, and when a sliver of daylight showed through the palm-sized window, Hong Yu died. Shu Ziyi didn't have much impression of maids like Hong Yu. Only knowing she had a steady temperament seemed to often help Chuang Yue tidy the room and taught the young Elfei Zhu. But even so, Shu Ziyi still felt a stifling ache in his chest, seemingly emotions coming from Chuang Yue. He had gone 2 days without food or water, only feeling his vision going black, but he dared not disobey his mother's orders. The heavy weight of filial piety sometimes made it hard for him to breathe. His father had died in battle 4 years ago. His elder brother had always been good for nothing, and only knew how to eat, drink, and have fun. All of his mother's reliance and hopes had fallen on his shoulders. "Madam, eat some secretly." The wet nurse came to see him in secret, and when no one was looking, stuffed 2 flatbreads into his hands. Madam used to miss these so much. The flatbreads were food from the northern wast's coarse flour cakes spread with butter, toasted crispy on both sides, yet soft, warm, and sweet in the middle. Hong Ye used to love eating them, but ever since she married into the general's manor, she never ate them again because others would say they were too lowly for the table. He had actually vaguely figured it out. Chuang Yu was deliberately erasing the habits she'd brought from the northern wastes, trying hard to fit into the general's manor for his sake. She used to complain to him, too, that the wine in the capital was too sweet. The chili wasn't spicy enough, and always eating pastries that were too sweet and too delicate would make a person weak. Later she stopped telling him these things, and even learned the etiquette and rules so well. Sometimes when he saw Chuang Yu, he would feel dazed. Was this the Chuang Yu who used to ride horses freely and sing aloud, wild and unrestrained, or some noble lady from a prestigious family? So when he met Xuanmeng, he wavered. He told Xuanmeng that what he had with her was just a momentary youthful impulse, and now he was tired of his rule-bound rigid wife, but couldn't conveniently divorce her. When Xuanmeng heard this, she kept sighing about this man-eating feudal system, where even falling out of love required all kinds of excuses to divorce a wife. Starving until midnight, he finally couldn't hold back and took out the flatbread, wolfing it down. He slept fitfully until the 3rd watch, vaguely hearing a commotion outside. He only felt his head was heavy, and seemed to be running a fever too. When he hazily woke up, he found himself lying in bed. Lu Zhu was brewing medicine, the whole room filled with its fragrance. Had mother realized she had wronged him? No, it was Yang Zhaoxi, who had ridden 3 horses to death, rushing day and night to the general's manor. Without even drinking a sip of water, he slammed that letter personally written by the general heavily onto the table. Galloping through the rain, sleepless for several nights, jostled on horseback, his eyes were frighteningly red. If Chuangyu is unwell, I won't live alone. These 8 characters were spoken by Yang Zhaoxi, and were also in the general's handwriting. Seeing Yang Zhaoxi so anxious, mother assumed it was her son's orders and didn't dare be careless, hurriedly sending for someone to examine and treat Chuangyu. Xu Ziyi leaned against the bed, looking at the letter. He knew Yang Zhaoxi's handwriting was very similar to his. After examining it carefully himself, he couldn't tell the difference either. So these 8 characters, were they instructed by Chuangyu, or your own selfish intentions? Yang Zhaoxi, from the hair ribbon binding your hair to you, abandoning scholarly pursuits for martial arts. And coming to the northern wastes, do you really take me, Xu Ziyi, for a fool? On the day Yang Zhaoxi returned from visiting the sick at home, it snowed in the northern wastes. He lifted the tent flap, covered in the chill of snow. Without even removing his cloak, he collapsed and fell asleep. It seems his father's serious illness at home has him very worried. The letter I had him deliver along the way has probably arrived too. Such a coincidence can only be called a blessing from heaven. Although I don't know what grudge Yang Zhaoxi has with Xu Ziyi, he really did help a lot this time. I took off his cloak for him, the snow had melted, and sleeping wet like this would surely make him sick. When I pulled up the blanket to cover him, I noticed the hair ribbon tying Yang Zhaoxi's hair had a small rad embroidered at the bottom. The stitching was rough. At first glance it looked familiar, but thinking about it, perhaps it was a token of love from some girl, so it wasn't my place to ask. Yang Zhaoxi slept until 3 days later before waking. Shoya suspected several times that I had smothered Yang Zhaoxi out of personal grudge, and secretly went to check if he was still breathing. The days were not peaceful. Sure enough, just as Yuan Qi predicted, on the night of the winter solstice, during the 3rd watch, an elite unit of the Shao tribe took advantage of the fog to flank around the side. They were skilled beast tamers, riding mountain Shao swiftly and silently across the snow. A piercing arrow pinned the leading mountain Shao's foot into the snow, and the ambushing soldiers' burst-out battle cries shook the heavens. I looked at these youths before me draped in beast hides. The youngest among them were only 12 or 13. One second, their young eyes were full of ambition. The next, they had lost limbs, trampled into pulp under iron hooves. Warm blood splattered onto the bridge of my nose, and the blade I raised hesitated. The thick smell of blood churned my stomach, and I turned aside, nearly vomiting. Watch out. Yang Zhaoxi's spear grazed past my ear. I stared blankly and turned my head. Only then seeing the Shao tribe youth behind me with his steel blade raised high, now skewered through by his spear. Yang Zhaoxi roared angrily. "What are you spacing out for?" I didn't know. I had lived for 23 years and had never killed a living thing, let alone a person. Someone alive just a second ago would be torn apart under my blade the next. "General, watch out." I turned my head, only to see a feathered arrow wrapped in biting snow-cold air shooting straight at my face. The next second, I was tackled to the ground, rolling twice. I struggled to get up and saw, in the distance, a youth dressed in Shao tribe attire standing at the edge of a cliff, his hawk-like golden eyes coldly watching me. It was the future king of the Shao tribe, the first Prince Muley. Legend said his mother was a holy maiden of the Eagle tribe, and he had the bloodline of hawks, able to see even in the dark of night. He wanted to loose another arrow, but Yang Zhaoxi noticed and pinned one at his feet. He turned around warily, and a pure white mountain Shao came howling from behind, snatching someone away. Before I could see clearly, man and beast vanished into the snow. "What are you doing?" Yang Zhaoxi raised his hand and punched me. Before I could react, I fell sitting into the snow. I just realized I was covered in blood, but it wasn't mine. I looked up and saw that feathered arrow embedded in the young man's chest, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. It was the young man who had hidden the silver hairpin that saved me. The Shao clan retreated their troops, and the military physician rushed over, but the wound was in a vital spot. There was nothing to be done. General. His face was covered in blood and grime. He tilted his head and coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood. Then, with trembling hands, pulled out that blood-stained hairpin from his chest and smiled at me. Please, bring this to a you. Tell her the engagement is off. I'm going to marry someone else. My lips trembled. I didn't dare to take it. He died because of me. He was killed by my hesitation. Yang Zhaoxi took the hairpin for me. He gripped his hand tightly, his throat choking up several times. Brother, rest easy. Hearing Yang Zhaoxi say this, the young man finally smiled in peace and slowly closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I collapsed to my knees on the ground, tears falling uncontrollably. Snow fell silently, stinging people's faces. Soldiers quietly cleaned up the battlefield. I knelt beside him. The melted snow had numbed my knees as well. Yang Zhaoxi looked at me thoughtfully, saying nothing. Molly had taken Xuanmeng away. Perhaps their burning of the grain supplies was just a feint. Molly had been targeting her all along. Otherwise, how else to explain that the human-like Shanshao didn't hurt anyone and Muli retreated as soon as he got what he wanted? Perhaps she really is the mountain spirit she claims to be, after all. The Shao tribe does have customs of worshipping mountain spirits. Tombstones were erected for the fallen brothers, and they were buried. I swung my blade again and again at the training grounds, hacking those straw dummies to pieces. Many brothers have died. You can't grieve for each and every one of them. Young Zhaoxi offered me a rare word of comfort. The evening sun's afterglow fell on the side of his face. When he wasn't acting crazy, he actually had a bit of a scholarly air about him. But he died because of my negligence. He didn't have to. I couldn't find any excuse for myself. What were you hesitating about? I saw that the Shao tribe soldier was young, and I couldn't bring myself to strike for a moment. I made up some random excuse. Have you forgotten that battle 4 years ago? He spoke vaguely, but I knew he meant the battle 4 years ago when Shu Zi's father died inside Beiwang City. That day was the Mid-Autumn Festival. The history books glossed over it as the shame of the bright moon. The capital treated this battle as taboo, forbidding those civil officials from discussing or memorializing it. That battle couldn't be fought anymore because the court's power struggles had already cut off grain and supplies to Beiwang. The Shao tribe shouted their slogan of "Kill them all." Their iron hooves crossed Laughing Corpse Mountain and trampled into Beiwang City, burning, killing, and looting, committing every evil imaginable. Women had iron thorns pierced through their palms and were led back to the Shao tribe as slaves and servants. Men were stripped naked like pigs and dogs, driven away, their heads shaved and faces branded, left to freeze to death in the snowy mountains. From Zixiao Corpse southward for 30 li, all shall be seated. And the 12 or 13-year-old boy you mentioned, with his military achievements, can be allocated 3 northern wasteland women as slaves. And the horsewhip in his hand is made from the shin bones of northern wasteland people. And you feel sorry for him? Before I finished speaking, Yang Zhaoxi's blade was already pressed against my neck. Unlike the intimidation last time, he stared at me intently, and what he said the next second made me break out in a cold sweat. You even pity the beasts of the Shao tribe. Are you really Shu Zi? The new year was approaching, and every household was stocking up on New Year goods. He was busy with social engagements, managing relations up and down, almost always working until late at night before sleeping. The war report of the Shao tribe's ambush soon reached the capital. This was the second major conflict between the two armies. Swords and blades are blind on the battlefield. Chuang Yu has never held a knife before. What if Shu Zi found himself thinking about her a lot lately? He would think of her when doing accounts late into the night, and also when waking up from afternoon naps. It was always during idle moments, like water slowly seeping through cracks in a cup, and by the time he realized it, a water stain had already spread there. Perhaps it was because this room was filled with her presence everywhere. In front of the window was a pipa covered with a layer of dust. She had learned the pipa from a wandering performer back when they were in Beiwang City. Her favorite piece to play was Prince of Lanling's Battle March. Saying the lyrics and melody were passionate and stirring. Actually, He knew she had learned it to play for him. Girls usually liked tender and sentimental tunes, who else was like her? But she just blushed and insisted she simply liked it herself. Account books were piled on the desk, and her favorite medical texts had all been put away in bookcases, left to gather dust. She had learned medicine from her father long ago. The old madam had once complained that instead of learning to treat people, she insisted on learning to treat livestock. Back then, she followed behind her father, treating wounded warhorses, and had even personally delivered Zhao Yi. What a pity that after marrying him, she was confined to the inner quarters, and all these skills fell into disuse. She hadn't had time to take any of the things in the room, except for that white jade hairpin with plum blossom and beauty design their betrothal token that she took with her. He had always thought he was the one who fell for Zhou Qiongyu at first, but now it seemed she had probably already liked him back then too, hadn't she? He still remembered that Lantern Festival night elopement, waiting at Yusian Bridge until midnight, only to wait until all the festive lanterns dimmed and the moon sank westward. She probably wasn't coming after all. Their parents didn't approve of this marriage anyway. He was just about to turn away when he heard hurried footsteps. He turned around and saw her wearing a moon-white padded jacket and blue silk skirt. The glistening moonlight shone on her face. She came running hurriedly, her face flushed, her eyes bright, even more enchanting than the moonlight. She rarely dressed up carefully. Back when she was in the northern wastes, she was just a wild tomboy. Now, with just a touch of makeup, she left him completely dazzled. She noticed he was about to leave, probably from running too fast. She propped her hands on her knees and shouted angrily, "Shu Ziyi, are you not going to wait?" She just stood there, both annoyed and upset. When she noticed he was staring dumbstruck, she pouted coquettishly, "I'm tired from running. You come here." He had carefully picked out a white jade beauty plum blossom hairpin, spent a whole year's salary on it, and made it their token of love. Later, he couldn't remember the later times very clearly. He only remembered that after she married him, she wasn't very happy anymore, and he had never really listened to what she said. She didn't understand the matters of war in the northern wastes, and he didn't understand the twists and turns of the inner household. The two of them had less and less to talk about. Later he wanted a child, but Chuangyu kept making excuses and was unwilling. Later she couldn't resist his pleading and nodded in agreement. Later he saw her secretly brewing contraceptive soup and had a huge fight with her. She just cried. "I'm just scared." He didn't know what she was scared of. Even his mother scolded her for being dramatic, saying that for hundreds of years women had all gone through this, that this was the suffering women were supposed to endure. So how come it was different when it came to her? Around that time, they grew distant. Later, he went out to fight in wars and met Xuan Meng. She was very different, free-spirited and natural, bold and passionate. She even kissed him on her own initiative the first night she saw him at Laughing Corpse Mountain. So much like Chuang Yue back then, her passion and novelty made him waver. "Madam, the pleasure house," says Miss Xuan Meng, has grown bored of the capital and is preparing to go to the northern wasteland. This kind of news would be sent in every now and then. She had many thoughts on her mind. Back then, Muli and I saw her at the same time, and I saw the unwillingness and burning desire in Muli's eyes. After arriving in the capital, countless nobles and aristocrats fell at her feet, while I was trapped in Chuangyue's body, unable to go out and meet her. She must have long since cast me to the back of her mind. I'll wait for Chuangyue to come back, apologize to her, and just pretend the matter of separation was never brought up. Perhaps this body swap is an opportunity to mend things. Shu Ziyi's mood suddenly improved, and he washed up, preparing to sleep. "Madam Concubine Zhou is about to give birth. She is asking for you to come help take a look." Elfei Ju rushed in hurriedly. "Me? How could I possibly?" Shu Ziyi was stunned. "The doctor is still on his way," the old madam said. "You once watched Shu Yuan's mother give birth before, so it would be good if you could lend a hand." Shu Ziyi couldn't explain himself clearly and was half pushed, half shoved by Elfei Zhu and a group of old maidservants to the delivery room. Fortunately, there was a midwife present, and he was only asked to stay by the side and keep company. Except for doctors. Men aren't allowed in the delivery room. I'm probably the first exception in this world. Auntie Jo lay on the bed, teeth clenched tight, her face purple and swollen, letting out terrifying screams, nothing like the imposing figure she used to be beside the old madam. Shuziyi watched with furrowed brows, unable to help thinking what if this pain fell upon Chuangyu. The old madam said nothing, only occasionally lifting her eyelids to check on things. After a long while without hearing any crying, she stood up and shook her head, saying, "It is no use. No use. What does that mean?" Just as Xu Ziyi was pondering this, an extremely faint cry of a baby girl came from inside. "Old madam, it is a girl." The midwife came to deliver the good news. The old madam only nodded, her expression calm as she acknowledged she understood. "A daughter is good. It is a daughter." The midwife smiled and brought the baby to show Auntie Jo. Auntie Jo's face instantly turned ashen. She stared blankly at the ceiling. Why isn't it a son?" As she said this, even her breath weakened. Suddenly her face went deathly pale, and glaring red blood spread in large patches across the bedding. The midwife's expression changed. "She is hemorrhaging. Hemorrhaging. Hemorrhaging." Xu Ziyi didn't understand. She had just given birth. How could she be hemorrhaging? Blood was being caught basin after basin. The midwives exchanged glances and sighed. Concubine Jo was drenched in sweat, eyes wide open. The paler her face became, the more vivid the rouge-colored mole beneath her eye appeared. Maids and servants hurried to boil water and prepare medicine, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Concubine Jo lay on the bed, breathing only out. Not in, her hand trembled as she raised it into the air, her gaze falling upon the group of women. When she saw Xu Ziyi, her eyes lit up for a moment. Chuangyu. Xu Ziyi, mindful of the propriety between men and women, didn't dare step forward. "Chuangyu, you hate me." Concubine Jo's complexion actually became rosier, but Xu Ziyi understood this was merely a final rally before death. Seeing Xu Ziyi avoid her, her eyes dimmed. "I'm a dying person now. Won't you set aside past grievances and listen to what I have to say? I've always been jealous of you. The general treats you well, but my husband treats me poorly. I felt fate was unfair. I stirred up trouble before the old madam, but you're so good. The better you are, the more I refuse to accept it. But I truly envied you. The general loves you so much, and there is no one in your room fighting with you. Unlike me, the sisters in this house, who has harmed me, who I've harmed, I can't even remember anymore." She let out a heavy sigh. "I hated that girl Hongyu, saving money coin by coin. How could I not know that money was all clean? But I just hate it. Seeing her is like seeing myself. I don't want to go back to those bitter days of selling wine on the street and being humiliated. I want to endure bit by bit, please my husband, please the old madam, and save up a little hope of rising above. But sometimes I don't even know what hope I'm saving up for. Is it to become a more favored concubine, to ride on my child's success and become the main wife? To wait until I reach the old madam's position? I don't know, but women have always been this way. It has always been like this, so it probably isn't wrong. But when you first came to the manor, you told me you went riding at Laughing Corpse Mountain in the northern wastes. You helped Joey give birth. You eloped with him on Lantern Festival night, rushing toward each other without a care. All that freedom in the first half of your life. I mocked your lowly birth, but actually, I was very envious." The midwife brought the infant before her for her to see a quiet, docile little girl who neither cried nor fussed. Fair-skinned like her, like a freshly brewed batch of fermented rice wine from the south. "It is a daughter, so the old madam doesn't like this child. Being a woman is hard, as if we're born to be despised. In the past, despised by mother and father after marriage, despised by mother-in-law, despised by husband. Chuangyu, I wronged you before. I made countless mistakes, but just for the sake that I'm dying, please promise me, help me raise her. For the sake that she shares the same surname as the general, teach her like you taught Shuyan. Don't let her go down the wrong path if she misbehaves. You can hit her or scold her. That is fine. Don't let her run wild." "Okay, Before she could finish her words, her breath had already ceased. A teardrop hung from the cinnabar mole at the corner of her eye, never falling. The room fell silent. Those concubines who usually chattered away all wiped their tears. Whether sincere or feigned, Jo Ruyu's words had inevitably stirred up some sad memories in them. Despite the wet nurse's devoted care, concubine Jo's child was weak from the womb and died after only half a month. Before her death, she admitted to the old madam that she had framed Kyungyu many times in the past, yet Shu Ziyi still didn't receive any kindness from the old madam. It had always been like this when mother did something wrong. She would never apologize to Chuangyu, but Chuangyu's father was different. Once he sold a duckling that he had promised to Chuangyu. When Chuangyu's eyes turned red, he anxiously ran to buy it back. But when he got to the buyer's place, he was dumbfounded with a whole yard full of ducklings. How could he tell which one it was? Chuangyu was born of low status, but she had once been a treasure held in her father's hands. After her father passed away, no one ever treated her like that again. Shu Ziyi suddenly felt a bit sad. Being with her, was Kyungyu truly happy? "Madam, good news! The great general has won the battle!" Lo Feizu ran in excitedly. "What about her?" Shu Ziyi hurriedly asked. "The general is naturally unharmed." "That is good. That is good. When she returns safely. I must properly apologize to Chuangyu and make up for everything I owed her before. If Madam misses the master, why not write him a letter?" Al Feiju ran off to grind ink with a teasing smile. After that unexpected incident, following several small victories in a row, I didn't dare be careless and relied heavily on Yang Zhaoxi and Yuan Qi. Killing someone for the first time left me shaken, often waking in the middle of the night. But thinking of what Yang Zhaoxi said, I pushed through even when terrified. I can't let anyone else get hurt because of me, even if nightmares wake me. At worst, I'll just go hack at haystacks in the training grounds all night. The general seems different somehow. The general's horsemanship seems to have improved from before. These past few days I went from hiding in the tent to getting used to drinking heartily around the bonfire with the soldiers, arms around each other's shoulders. I'm afraid when I go back, even Elfeiju and Hongyu won't recognize me. I've also lost count of how many times I've fallen asleep, clutching my saber, covered in blood, collapsing onto the bed. At that moment, the sun hadn't fully set yet, golden afterglow shining upon the silver-cold snow mountains, piercing through the primordial snow mist halfway up the peak. The dazzling gold nestled gently within the towering cold gleam, a vista of piercing chill as far as the eye could see, with a single touch of tender softness. How long had it been since I'd seen such an open view? I couldn't remember. Back then, I was confined to the trivial matters of the inner courtyard, forced to copy Erta, and admonitions for women dozens of times until I nearly forgot those days of riding horses across the northern wastes. I suddenly remembered that I had once wanted to spend my whole life on horseback, living together with Zhaoye and the others. Being an old spinster in the stables, singing freely by day, and watching the stars at night. Those days were truly exhilarating. Sometimes when I came back to my senses on horseback, I even doubted whether those 4 years in the inner courtyard had truly existed in my life. At night, the campfire crackled in the tent. Wine cups clinked together, splashing amber light as soldiers celebrated together, beating drums and singing. "After the war is over, what do you all want to do?" Yang Zhaoxi tilted her head back and downed a cup of strong liquor, as if swallowing crushed ice. The northern wastes were cold, and one had to rely on strong liquor to stay warm. "What about you, Shoya? What will you do after the war?" Yuan Qi was curious. After partnering with Shoya for so many years, she had never heard him talk about his future plans. "At the very least, I'll be granted the title of Marquis of 10,000 households. Right? Then I'll build a manor and raise a group of talented and extraordinary people inside. When the world falls into chaos, I'll wave my hand and protect our southern kingdom, using the emperor's taboo name, 10 military lashes. The southern kingdom emperor's name contained the character U. By the firelight, I marked the military treatise with a vermilion brush, ignoring Shuya's exaggerated screams. What about you, Yuan Qi? I'd compare myself to the sleeping dragon or fledgling phoenix, find some wilderness to live in seclusion, Bring along 2 or 3 young attendants. You've gone into seclusion, but still haven't purified your 6 senses. 1 isn't enough. You're bringing 2 or 3. Shoya widened his eyes, his face full of disdain. Bringing 2 cleaning boys. Yuank was so angry smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. Surely I don't have to empty my own chamber pot after going into seclusion? Makes sense. I nodded. Then what is the last one for? Shuya smiled with a suggestive look on his face. To watch the dog, so he doesn't go catching mice when he has got nothing to do. Yuanke smiled at Shuya. A dog catching mice? Shuya found it novel. Don't you also like to meddle in others' business? Yuanke's smile remained unchanged. Poor Shuya didn't catch the hidden meaning. He probably wouldn't let out an exasperated roar from his tent until midnight. That bastard Yuank tricked me. What about you? Yang Zhaoxi tilted her head to look at me. The brush in my hand paused slightly. Yeah, what would I do? Shu Zi was going to marry Miss Xuanmeng, and by then I would truly be all alone, with nowhere to go. You first? I asked Yang Zhaoxi back. I know, Shoya grinned mischievously. Our young General Yang definitely wants to take in those orphans in the northern wastes and open a charity house. Don't be fooled by his proper appearance, the legitimate grandson of the Duke's mansion, but his pockets are cleaner than his face. He can't even afford drinking money, just drinks cheap baijiu. The men below chimed in. Then I'll go help Vice General Yang out. I smiled. Really? Yang Zhaoxi looked at me eagerly, then realized he was too eager and hurriedly sat back down. I was just asking. There is a lot about Yang Zhaoxi I can't figure out. From the first time I met him, gentle and modest, like a respectful and polite younger brother, to later when he couldn't get the love he wanted and threatened me with a knife like a little madman, to now always following behind me, paying attention to everything. And when I look at him, he pretends he wasn't watching me. I once suspected Yang Zhaoxi had figured something out, but that didn't seem likely. I recalled that day when Yang Zhaoxi pressed the knife against my neck, forcing me to prove myself. Who the hell are you? Yang Zhaoxi looked at me warily. Take off your clothes. I knew he wasn't joking. I gritted my teeth and hurriedly undid my top. It was Shu Ziyi's body anyway. Yang Zhaoxi looked at the wound on my right arm, and half of his suspicion faded. That wound was from when he took a hit for Shu Ziyi. Shu Ziyi told me he owed Yang Zhaoxi his life. Yang Zhaoxi used his own left shoulder to block an arrow that should have hit his chest, so his left arm has an old injury that is hard to bear on cloudy or rainy days. The wound can't be faked, so there is no way he could find out, and even less likely he'd think of body swapping. Really? Hearing me say this, Yang Zhaoxi leaned against the tent and avoided looking at me, only turning his head to drink. Perhaps the wine was too strong. The tips of his ears flushed slightly, the redness spreading all the way to the corners of his eyes. When he looked up and saw me watching him, he panicked and choked on a mouthful of wine. He tried several times to hold it in, but couldn't, coughing violently. He really is still just a young man. But I never expected this statement to prove true, nearly causing a disaster. On New Year's Eve night, Yang Zhaoxi secretly went to Laughing Corpse Mountain alone. On New Year's Eve, the Shao tribe has a tradition of worshipping the mountain spirits. On this day, Muli, as the heir to the throne, must keep vigil alone in a cave on Laughing Corpse Mountain for one night. Yang Zhaoxi's thinking was simple: to catch bandits. First catch their king. He would kidnap Muli as a hostage, but he underestimated his enemy. The Shao tribe's ritual customs had been held for years. Had anyone ever truly succeeded? Even Shu Ziyi's father had once thought of launching a sneak attack, but the snowy night environment was harsh. The Shao tribe domesticated snow wolves and mountain Shao. Snow wolves have extremely keen senses of smell, and mountain Shao are skilled at crying out. If one hears a mountain Shao's call in the snowy mountains, it is like the king of hell ringing his bell, urgently summoning death at the third watch. Those with weak minds cannot bear the mountain Shao's cries. Already disoriented from the cold in the snowy mountains, upon hearing the mountain Shao's wailing, they would begin to hallucinate, stripping off their clothes piece by piece, freezing into laughing corpses in the snow. Laughing Corpse Mountain got its name from this. Mu Li was extremely cunning. sending mountain demons to clear the path and snow wolves to patrol at night, surrounding the cave entrance so tightly that not even wind could pass through. The weather was terrible that day, dense dark clouds so thick they couldn't disperse. Daylight was like night, with no sunlight to be seen. Not a single snowflake fell during the day, as if a blizzard was brewing for the night. Yang Zhaoxi still hadn't returned. General, a letter from Madam for you. Just leave it there. It is nothing but urging me to come back soon for the divorce. Reading it would only be annoying. I suddenly realized I had changed before. I used to wait every day for Xu Ziyi's letters. A single sentence from him was enough for me to open and read over and over again. Now I seem to no longer care. I have to go save him. Zhaoye grew up running on Corpse Smile Mountain. It knows the paths well in this kind of weather. Only Zhaoye can enter the mountain. Get the soldiers settled and have a good new year. I instructed Yuan Qi, do as I said and keep the army's morale steady. The snow fell heavily. Snowflakes the size of cushions cut at faces like blades. The deeper into the snowy mountain, the more restless Zhaoye became. I smelled a thick scent of blood coming from a snow cave halfway up the mountain. Wolf corpses everywhere. I reached out to check. The bodies were still warm. Zhaoye seemed to have caught a scent and galloped wildly. Looking from afar at the snow cave entrance halfway up the mountain, Yang Zhaoxi was using his long spear to pin down Muley with all his might. He was covered in blood, barely recognizable as human. Muley let out a cold laugh and blew the bone flute under her tongue. The bone flute was specially made, almost silent in such snowy mountains. There couldn't be any sharp whistle sounds, or an avalanche would take people's lives. Strangely, the snow suddenly stopped, and the moon rose. From afar came waves of mournful cries, sounding like wailing infants and weeping women, unsettling the heart, as if countless vengeful ghosts on the Laughing Corpse Mountain were struggling to crawl out from under the snow to claim lives. It is the mountain demons. Even without having their souls seized by the mountain demons, these creatures possessed immense strength and obeyed Muley's commands. If they were lured here, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yang Zhaoxi's mind was already unclear. He was exhausted from fighting the wolf pack, and the mountain demon's cries were like a death warrant. Muley took advantage of Yang Zhaoxi's dazed state to grab the longbow, intending to strangle him with the bowstring. Zhaoye neighed anxiously. This cave was on a cliff face, and she couldn't find a way down to it. The situation was critical, but I couldn't care about all that. I jumped from the cliff edge, broken pine branches and pebbles scraping against my face, stinging painfully. Tiny pebbles rolled from beside my hands into the bottomless abyss, shattering to pieces. I seized the opportunity to grab Muley's foot. He struck my arm hard with his longbow, but I bit down and refused to let go. After all, he was still just a youth, and his body wasn't as well trained and robust as Xu Ziyi's. He passed out from my arm, choking him. I didn't dare be careless. Using both hands and mouth, I bound his hands with the bowstring and confiscated his bone flute. I caught my breath, leaning against the snow cave and panting heavily. From my arm to my ribs, the pain was excruciating. It seemed several bones had been broken. Lunatic. Muley recovered and glared at me with his golden hawk-like eyes. I mustered my last bit of strength, propping Yang Zhaoxi against my shoulder, calling to him over and over. "Zhaoxi, wake up." He leaned against me weakly, and as he tilted his head back, his lips brushed against mine. The young man's lips were dry and burning hot, sending a thunderbolt through my heart. In his dream, he murmured, "Sister Chuangyu." This call of Sister Chuangyu struck me like lightning. He called me Sister Chuangyu. He recognized me. Hilarious. You risked your life to save him, yet he is thinking about your wife. Muley mocked. "You know my wife? Heard a woman mention her once. Very boring. Can't keep her husband's heart." Alarm bells rang in my mind. Which woman? My concubine, Xuanmeng. He smiled provocatively, trying to see a hint of anger on my face. "I heard she got quite close to the general a while back." "Oh." I responded indifferently, suddenly realizing that my heart no longer had any ripples. Whether it was Miss Xuan Meng who ruined things between me and Shuzi back then, or the name Shuzi itself, neither could stir any feelings in my heart anymore, not as thrilling as that one-word sister from Yang Jiaoxi. You don't hate her. Muley was clearly unwilling to accept my calm reaction. Hate, hate, hate. I hate her to death, happy now. I leaned against the wall, feeling my whole body burning up. This bough was laced with poison. You'll die. Then let me die. I only felt my head getting heavier and heavier. After going through so much, life and death suddenly didn't seem that important. Unexpectedly, hearing me say this, Yang Jiaoxi woke up. Seeing half my body already in a gruesome state, his eyes immediately reddened. "Didn't you always wish for my death?" I sighed. This person was really strange. Back then, he hated Shuziyi so much he wanted to kill him. But now seeing him in such a sorry state, his eyes turned red instead. He choked up and couldn't say a word. Half my body was like rotten flesh, and even if he wanted to help, he didn't know where to start. When one is on the verge of death, the five senses become extraordinarily sharp. As my consciousness drifted, I heard the sound of horse hooves from very, very far away. Perhaps the Shao tribe's reinforcements had arrived. I struggled to pull out the white jade beauty plum blossom hairpin from my chest. The hairpin felt warm and smooth to the touch, exquisitely carved. Back then, Shuzi had picked plum blossoms from the northern wastes. In the melting spring colors of February, we met secretly behind the wall. I stood atop the wall looking up at him, and he leaned down from his tall horse, smiling warmly as he pinned a beauty plum blossom still wet with northern wastes snow into my hair. Just like the poem says, gazing at each other from atop the wall and horse, one glance at you and my heart already breaks. What a pity I only heard the first half back then on Lantern Festival. I eloped with him regardless of everything, pledging ourselves to each other for life. But because of my lowly birth, I was slandered and squeezed out by his family. My young man eventually grew tired of me too, and our childhood sweethearts ended up like this. For a moment, I sighed with endless emotions. I struck the hairpin hard against the mountain wall. The jade broke into 2 pieces. I handed half to Yang Jiaoxi. If it is the Shao tribe army coming, should I fear death? Use this hairpin to end me. I must not be threatened by enemies. If it is the northern waste soldiers coming, should my poison flare up, the army will surely doubt me. Half the hairpin as proof the strategist will understand. Help me take care of Miss Ayu. Don't lie to her. I'm sorry. Yang Jiaoxi's face became harder and harder to see. In my hazy consciousness, it seemed like 2 drops of water fell on my face. He seemed to call out Sister Qiangye twice, but I couldn't hear clearly. I felt my consciousness growing more and more blurry in the haziness. I couldn't recall anyone anymore. My body grew lighter and lighter. So light it felt like I could soon gallop freely across the northern wastes. If this is a dream, I hope I never wake up. The grasslands of the northern wastes aren't like the square patch of sky in the rear courtyard, the square yard. Here, no one reproaches me for my lowly birth. No one stares at my belly saying I'm useless. No one presses my head down forcing me to copy rules for women and admonitions for women, forcibly carving those rules into my heart. No one criticizes my unruly carefree life of the past decade or so. No one tells me that loving someone means having to endure all kinds of grievances in this world for him. In my dream, the northern wastes burst into spring bloom in an instant. The snow on Corpse Mountain melted. The pasture grass grew so lush it could squeeze out drops of oil. The grass reached up to Zhao Yi's belly. She carried me, and we galloped freely across the northern wastes. The grasslands so vast they seemed to stretch on forever. Father had not yet fallen gravely ill. He stood under the blazing summer sun, lifted his head and blew a whistle, and Zhao Ye happily galloped toward him. He lovingly patted my head, wiping the sweat from my forehead. I hugged Zhao Yi's neck and smiled at him. "Daddy, can we have flatbread for lunch?" "Sure." "Daddy, can we go ride horses by Moon Lake tonight?" "Sure." "Chuangyi will never marry. We'll depend on each other for life. Just the 2 of us. Okay." "Okay." Along with the news of the great victory in the northern wastes came word that the commanding general Su Ziyi had fallen unconscious, her fate unknown. When this news reached the general's manor, everyone from old to young wept in grief. I heard the general was poisoned while saving the vice-general. Fortunately, the reinforcements captured the Shao tribe's eldest prince as hostage, and they're negotiating peace now. Then he turned the letter over and over, hoping to find a glimmer of hope beyond the words, fate unknown. Madam, why not pray to the Bodhisattva and ask the gods to bless the master? Alfei reminded Shu Ziyi. He rushed frantically to the Buddha shrine. Having fought on battlefields and witnessed countless partings of life and death, he had never believed in gods or Buddha. But at this moment he truly wanted to worship every deity in heaven, begging them to bring his wife home safely. The Buddha statue sat silent, the prayer cushion worn with age. Thick Buddhist scriptures piled on the desk, and a half-burned prayer slip lay in the incense burner. May I exchange this body for my husband's lifelong safety and peace? This thick stack of Buddhist scriptures was all in Zhou Qiangyu's handwriting. She had been so devout that there wasn't a single mistake. He thought of her trapped in the inner courtyard, kowtowing countless times before the Buddha, devoutly copying scriptures, hoping for his safe return. Holding this half-burned prayer slip, tears streamed down his face. While he and Xuanmeng were galloping across the grasslands, Qiangyu had been kneeling before the Buddha, kowtowing again and again. When she brought up wanting a child time and time again, Qiangyu's fear of past events was triggered. Yes, back then he shouldn't have listened to his mother and the concubine's instigation, saying that being a woman meant enduring the suffering, and assumed she was just being delicate and willful. Because she had witnessed Xu Yuan's mother die in childbirth, had seen how the concubines in the back courtyard eyed motherless Xu Yuan, so she became afraid. Yet he only listened to others say she was delicate, but never once asked her why she was unwilling. When he complained that Chuangyu had become increasingly dull and boring, he seemed to have forgotten that she too had once ridden horses with him across the northern wilderness, eloped on Lantern Festival night, and dared to boldly grip his hand back when he took hers on their wedding day. Chuangyu, you must come back safely. Let's just say this body swap is heaven, giving me another chance to take good care of you. When I slowly woke up, before my eyes was a haggard-looking Yang Zhaoxi. He was dozing off, propped up by the side of my bed with dark circles under his eyes. Little brother? I unconsciously called out softly, then realized it was inappropriate and hastily corrected myself. But he woke up, hurriedly leaned forward, touched my forehead, confirmed I was really awake, and his eyes instantly reddened. How I tried to raise my hand to comfort him, only to find that every bone in my body ached. You've been lying here for a month. We've gone through all the doctors around. I struggled to sit up. Yang Zhaoxi supported me, and I leaned gently against his shoulder, sitting up to take a sip of water. Don't worry, everything's been taken care of. We're just waiting for you to come back for the victory celebration. Yang Zhaoxi told me what happened after I passed out, and only then did I learn that the sounds I heard that day were reinforcements brought by Zhao Ye. The general's awake. Shouya, who came in to deliver medicine, excitedly ran out. Brothers, the general's awake. I want to go outside and get some fresh air. I looked up at Yang Zhaoxi, but I didn't expect that. As I tilted my head up, my lips brushed against his neck, causing a thin layer of goosebumps to rise on his skin. He gripped the clothes on his lap tightly, his body so stiff he couldn't utter a single word. Is that okay? Getting no response, I asked softly again. He still said nothing. I sensed something was off. And when I looked again, his face had already flushed red all the way to the tips of his ears, his lips trembling, unable to say a word. I thought this little madman would only hold a knife against me, eyes red, wanting to kill me. I never expected he could blush too. Could I have misunderstood? The person he likes isn't Miss Xuanmeng, but Shu Ziyi. Before I could think it through, he finally spoke. Okay, I'll take you outside. Outside, Shouya had gathered people sitting in a circle, and Yang Zhaoxi draped a thick cloak over me. You know those dead people on Laughing Corpse Mountain. What do you think they saw before they died? They stripped off their clothes and were smiling so happily. Skinny Crow held a black duck feather plucked from Yuan Kua's coat collar in his mouth, crossing his legs leisurely while picking his teeth. Shanshao are lustful by nature and mimic human voices. What do you think they called out to make people strip? Yuan Qi looked at the bald patch on the black duck feather collar and shot Skinny Crow a glare. You want to have some fun, mister? After saying that, Skinny Crow wrapped his black crow cloak tighter around himself in alarm. Wouldn't this young master be in great danger then? Yuan Qi refused to say another word to this idiot. That night, if Zhao Yi hadn't run back to camp for help, he would rather die than work together with Skinny Crow. They say the Shanshao's calls can make people see the person they miss the most. Once there was a couple who met with disaster on Laughing Corpse Mountain. Trapped under the snow, they heard the Shanshao mimicking human voices and thought the other was right in front of them. They struggled desperately toward each other, but the more they dug, the deeper the snow became until they finally froze to death in the snow. The Shangshao had played a trick on them. Originally, the snow above them was barely a foot thick, and they were back to back. They could have been saved. General, what did you guys hear? Someone with iron will like me usually doesn't fall for anything except honey traps. Skinny Crow joked around with a grin. The person they miss the most. Thinking of that sister Qiangyu, he called out in the cave. My face flushed, and I instinctively looked up at Yang Jiaoxi. Could it be that the one he likes isn't Xuanmeng, isn't Shuziyi? But me, thinking of this possibility, my face instantly turned red. Yet Yang Jiaoxi didn't look at me. He bit his lower lip, turned his head to gaze at the distant snow mountains, a suspicious blush coloring his face. Rumor has it that the night the general woke up, the vice-general went crazy with joy, brandishing his silver spear fiercely on the training ground all night, like a wild wolf running free, making so much noise that the sleep-deprived Shoya fought with him the next day. My body had completely recovered, but the soldiers wouldn't let me off, holding me down and forcing 3 large cups of baijiu down my throat. Yang Jiaoxi desperately tried to stop them, but the scheming Yuang hooked his neck with an elbow, grinning as he dragged him over to drink. Days like these, once I switch back, I'll never see them again. Right. Yang Jiaoxi had a very low alcohol tolerance. Usually he only drank to ward off the cold. After being forced drunk, he returned to the tent and sat there blankly, neither throwing a tantrum nor making a fuss. I'd seen him act like a little lunatic, seen him kill a man every 10 steps on the battlefield, but I'd never seen him this quiet. The candlelight flickered, his long lashes casting shadows, his side profile sharply defined. He was clearly still just a child, afraid he'd catch cold. I found an outer robe to drape over him. He held that empty jar of wine, and in his sleep he murmured ever so softly, "Sister Chuangye." My hand paused as I was draping clothes over him. The date for the general's return to the capital was put on the agenda. The day they arrived in the capital was the finest weather of March. The common folk spontaneously lined the streets to welcome them, blocking the road so tightly that not even water could pass through. Shuzi and the other family members kept tiptoeing to catch a glimpse. She wore red, riding Zhou, her hair tied high in a ponytail, splendid attire, spirited steed, full of vigor. Shuzi was dressed in white, making the red ribbon in his hair all the more eye-catching, like a crimson flag against the white snow of the northern wastes, riding high on the spring breeze. In the spring light of March, countless love-struck young girls leaned out from the buildings, tossing flowers and fruits at her, red sleeves waving from the high towers. Yang Jiaoxi's eyes were full of smiles. He bent down to accept the flower wreaths woven by the little girls, dismounted, and called out to her ahead. She paused, saw the flower wreath in his hand, and leaned down to hear what he whispered in her ear. The two of them, one in red and one in white, that posture was so intimate, intimate like lovers whispering. Then the flower wreath landed on her head. She looked at Yang Jiaoxi, her smile radiant. The screams of countless young girls and boys made Shuziyi feel restless and unsettled. My child, it is good that you've returned safely. Mother carefully touched her face. The various concubines said many pleasing words, and the maids prepared the welcome banquet. Her eyes swept over everyone here, responding to each of their greetings politely and courteously. Yet she alone wouldn't look at him. Shuziyi felt an unbearable emptiness in his heart, suddenly recalling that time when he brought Xuanmeng back. She had so eagerly awaited his return, yet he was so cold. She must have felt awful too back then. Yang Zhaoxi seemed to want to say something, but his mother warmly invited. "Vice General, please stay for dinner." So the feast began. She ate a couple of bites before setting down her chopsticks and said, "Mother, I want to divorce Chuangyu." Zhuziyi froze, staring at her blankly. She finally deigned to look at him. The meaning in her eyes was clear. "We agreed on this before." "No, mother, I don't agree." Shuziyi hurriedly stood up. "Ziyi has returned victorious, and His Majesty intends to grant him additional honors and rewards. I already felt he was shortchanged when he married you back then. Look at which noble family's daughter-in-law isn't a well-bred lady of distinguished birth. Now take a look at yourself. Are you even worthy of Ziyi?" The old madam's face hardened as she slammed her chopsticks onto the table. "Exactly. Being able to stay in the general's manor for 4 years and see the world is already your good fortune. A low-born wild girl. Everyone knows you, and Ziyi eloped on Lantern Festival. Who knows if you were still pure when you entered this household?" The sharp and biting words poured into his ears as Shuziyi stared blankly at Chuang Yu. Had she been bearing all of this for the past 4 years? She sipped her tea with an unchanged expression, meeting his gaze with calm composure, no anger, no sadness, no questioning, and not a trace of adoration for him anymore. In the past, she would nestle in his arms, coquettishly calling him husband. In the past, when he misunderstood her due to his family's instigation, her eyes were full of grievance, with love and hate mingled in her tears. Even that night, when he forced himself on her, her eyes clearly showed pain and unwillingness, along with a struggling love deep within. But now there was nothing. She looked at him as if looking at a stranger. Shuziyi felt his heart aching wave after wave. He realized that the nightmare he spoke of on their wedding night might be coming true. He was going to lose Chuangyu. The daytime weather was still fine, but as night fell, the spring rain drizzled on and on, making one restless. "Don't worry, I didn't want to come here either. I asked around if we share a bed for 1 more night. We'll switch back when we wake up." Afraid Shuziyi might misunderstand. "I lay down fully dressed. If Miss Xuanmeng asks, I'll explain everything to her clearly. I added a clause to the peace treaty to ransom Miss Xuanmeng back and sent her to the general's mansion. Miss Xuanmeng remained silent the entire way back from the northern wastes, not saying much to me. I once thought of setting her free, but all those men who used to admire and pursue her now thought that since she went to the northern wastes and ended up like this, she must have lost her chastity to the barbarians. Whoever married such a woman would be gossiped about. They avoid her like the plague for the sake of their futures, for the sake of their reputations. The distinction between wife and concubine men understand it all too well. Just having some fun. How could I dare bring this kind of woman home as a wife?" Miss Xuanmeng, pale-faced, tried to argue that victims are blameless, that everyone is equal, only to invite another round of mocking laughter. I recalled when I mentioned Xuanmeng to Molly, this man trapped in the southern kingdom, as a hostage, had a face full of mockery. She is naive and lively, always full of strange ideas in her head. She likes to say everyone is equal, and she even told the servants not to address her with honorifics. She was the first one not scared by my golden pupils. She even said I must have suffered a lot because of these golden eyes, then touched my eyes and called me Ajin, meaning a priceless treasure. The flickering candlelight in the great hall illuminated half his face. This fallen man was still as hauntingly bewitching as a demon. In our Shao tribe, a woman is worth half a snow wolf. But she was different. She had so many ideas in her head, seemed so special. Mully smiled mysteriously, carrying the cruelty carved into the bones of the Shao tribe. "So I traded her and my younger brothers for 3 pregnant she-wolves." I was stunned. I'd long heard that the northern wastes had fierce customs and never treated women as people. Even in winter, when food was scarce, It was tacitly accepted that women could be cooked as winter meat. She is just a woman, delusionally trying to trade her flesh for power from men, wanting to become the queen of the northern wastes. Golden eyes are proof of the Eagle King's bloodline. How ignorant. You Central Plains men claim to treasure her, but in my view she is just a novelty plaything. In the Central Plains, there are 3 kinds of women: wives and mothers, nuns, and prostitutes. But among us Shao tribe, it has a different meaning. No wolf pack, no mountain Shao, no bloodline, no soldiers, no beast-taming skills, and you dare speak of equality with me. Hearing such naked words for the first time left me dizzy. I don't hate her, nor do I pity her exactly, only endless sorrow and sighs as a fellow woman. The principles of this world are heavy shackles upon women before. I was locked in a noble mansion, kneeling on the ground, copying those books, never knowing how vast men's world truly was. The mountains of the northern wastes are forever open to them. They can ride horses and sing freely, fighting for their own futures. From youth to old age, as long as he wishes, he can always remain a young man. Born as a woman, if you have the courage to elope with your lover, it is called wanton elopement. If you have wild talent, you become a rare plaything worth 1,000 gold. But when these things fall upon men, eloping on Lantern Festival night, spending a fortune for a smile that is called timeless romance, no one can speak these words if spoken. They'd probably be even more frightening than me and Shuzi having switched bodies. As for how she and Shuzi will get along, it has nothing to do with me anymore. I don't care anymore. The night was deep and slightly cold. The water clock chimed once. I won't marry her. Shuzi tried to take my hand. Chongyu, please don't be angry anymore. It was my fault before. We're already divorced. I pulled my hand away, not looking at him. His hand froze. Then he pleaded with me again. Chongyu, please don't be angry. I was wrong. I didn't know you suffered so much. Mother made things difficult for you. I know. Now those concubines schemed to harm you. I know that too. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I'll protect you. Can you trust me one more time? He still didn't understand, thinking I was throwing a tantrum like when I was young, that coaxing would make it better. Things have come to this. From now on our paths diverge. All I have left is a heart full of sorrow. Suddenly, as if he thought of something, are you in love with Yang Jiaoxi? He has always had his eyes on you. I was stunned and sighed, no. I'm begging you, please don't fall for him. Give me another chance? He, Shu Ziyi, General Shu, had always been full of vigor and spirit. When had he ever been so humble? If he knew it would come to this, why did he act that way in the first place? Back then, when your mother insulted and belittled me, I never once slacked off because she was your mother. It wasn't that I lost my mother young and was eager to find myself another one. She acts all sweet and gentle in front of you, claiming over and over that she treats me like a daughter. But how would you know, being all the way in the northern wastes, about all the grievances I've suffered in this rear courtyard, whose daughter isn't treasured like a precious gem in her own home? Though my family may be poor and lowly, we're not so destitute that we can't support an old, unmarried daughter. As for the children you mentioned, I'm truly afraid. I'm afraid that swords and blades on the battlefield have no eyes, leaving him and me to weep day after day. I'm afraid I'll be like my mother, like Shu Yuan's mother, passing away before even getting a chance to see the child. I'm afraid the women in the rear courtyard will only fight to snatch a child, to secure their position, neglecting proper guidance. I'm afraid he'll be heartless and faithless, letting others down. I'm afraid she'll be like me, loving someone so recklessly, casting aside worldly conventions, offering up a heart full of adoration, just wanting to rush to that person, only to be called a wanton eloper by her in-laws, abandoned and divorced by her husband, criticized by others day after day. I'm afraid she'll walk the same path I did. The moonlight outside shone in, filling the room with moonlight like water, just like that night when he cast me aside, like worn-out shoes. If not for heaven's mercy, letting us switch places, he probably still wouldn't know to repent. He clenched his fists tightly, and finally, gritting his teeth, dropped heavily to his knees before me. Moonlight flooded into the room, the chamber silent. My expression remained unchanged. His knees may be worth gold, but my true heart is a priceless treasure too. Seeing me unmoved, he tried to grab my hand. Chuang-yu, it is all my fault. I promised to take care of you, but I failed. Please forgive me, okay? Don't divorce me, please. I know the affairs of the inner court have worn you out. From now on, you don't have to deal with them. I only trust you. There is no going back anymore, yet he still doesn't understand. Doesn't understand that the trivial daily matters were merely a fuse. Ziyi, I want to divorce you, and it is not entirely because of these 4 years of tedious and exhausting life in the inner court. These 4 years blinded by love. I was willing to learn to be a proper noble lady, willing to be confined here for you, so you'd have no worries at home. But that love is gone now, and I've figured things out. I no longer hate your mother, nor do I hate those concubines who made things difficult for me. Their lives are too bitter. If I had never galloped across the hunting grounds, never drank sanbai wine heartily with others, never seen the wider world beyond these deep walls, I too would have slowly become like concubine Zhuang or concubine Zhou, trapped in this cage, fighting them to the death. But I have seen it, I've remembered it, and I'm no longer content to just wait in the inner court for a man to love me. The sky in the northern wastes is so blue, it seems to seep water. The summer pastures of Laughing Corpse Mountain stretch endlessly. The vast heaven and earth intoxicate me. I still have so many things I want to do. My heart can no longer be placed on him. He stared at me blankly, as if he couldn't understand what I was saying. Then after the divorce, how will you make a living on your own? I smiled. Back when he divorced me, he never once thought about how I would survive all alone, and now he thinks of it. We made a promise back then. We were so close, I traveled across the northern wastes to pick a plum blossom for you. Do you still remember what you said? Gazing at each other from the wall and horseback, one glance and I knew my heart would break for. You Chuang-yu, you still love me, you do, don't you? You're just angry with me. You promised me back then you wouldn't let that dream of mine come true. In the dream, you rode away on Zhouyi, never once looking back at me. I won't go off to war anymore. We'll just be an ordinary couple. I won't let mother scold you anymore either. I said nothing more. His voice grew more and more humble. In the darkness, he gripped my hand tightly, just like on our wedding day, afraid I would leave, refusing to let go. I knew he must be crying. We can never go back to the way things were. Those days of innocent childhood sweethearts. The silver candles burned high all night, just like on our wedding night. That night he refused to sleep, just held me in his arms, clasping my hand, gazing at me with a silly smile. Chuang-yu is really my wife now. I know Chuang-yu has suffered a lot marrying me. I won't let Chuang-yu down. I have to keep a close eye on you, or they'll try to tear us apart again. I'll fight well in battle once I have a say in this household. No one will dare bully you anymore. Later, as household matters piled up, he became even busier, and he rarely replied to the letters I sent. He was troubled by the war while I was vexed by household affairs at that time. We gradually drifted apart and could barely talk anymore. Actually, we were both trying hard to reach each other. I set aside my pipa and medical books, forgot those carefree days, stepped from horseback into the noble household, diligent and respectful, not daring to be careless, fearing others would laugh at him for marrying an uncouth village woman who didn't know proper etiquette. He fought long on the battlefield covered in wounds, cautious in battle, not daring to be reckless, those advantages my maternal family couldn't give him. He said he would earn himself so that others wouldn't dare look down on me, and so I wouldn't feel guilty. But in this world, mutual love doesn't guarantee growing old together. Back then we were too young. Once we set our hearts on each other, we threw caution to the wind, endured the cane until it broke, bore the shackles of worldly judgment, exchanged blood and tears for our wedding cup, and thought the greatest hardship between lovers in this world had already been weathered by us. But life has a hideous face, and the wedding night merely lifted a corner of its veil. The maiden plays with green plums. Leaning on the low wall, the gentleman rides a white horse beside the weeping willow. Atop the wall and upon the horse, gazing at each other from afar, at first sight, knowing you would break my heart. It is Bylishan's poem, but he didn't know the latter half of this, drawing up a silver bottle from the well. For one day of your grace, you've ruined 100 years of my life. Shuzi and I switched back. To celebrate the end of the war in the northern wastes, the capital indulged in feasting and drinking, with lanterns burning bright, reveling for 3 days. 3 days of revelry, during which women could also go out together for leisure. I took Elphaziu to the temple, the young man who died protecting me, Hong Yu who followed me for a while, and concubine Zhou whose life had been snuffed out. I wanted to find monks to hold a ceremony for them. After leaving the temple, the streets were bustling with excitement. Groups of women stepped down from their carriages, maids chatting and laughing merrily. Fragrant ribbons fluttering, soft lights shimmering. The night market ran for 3 days straight, with red and green decorations draped everywhere. Dazzling and colorful, seasonal trinkets from the beginning to the end of the year were all available. Children squabbled over whether to get tiger lanterns or rabbit lanterns, whether their sugar figurines should be Liu Bei or Guan Yu, whether their masks should be the White Wolf King or Sun Wukong, arguing until their faces turned red. Laughter and chatter filled the air, rising up like the warmth of everyday life. Elphaziu was only 13. She was sad for a while, but then got distracted by the lively streets and felt playful again. At some point, the crowd jostled us apart, and I couldn't find her. Instead, I stumbled upon Wangxian Bridge, the same place where Shu Zi and I had made our vows. The lake was tranquil. Occasionally, a breeze would blow crabapple blossoms from beside the bridge, drifting to the center of the lake, luring fish to the surface, sending ripples spreading outward. I let the late spring wind blow through my hair as I leaned against the bridge railing, lost in thought. A few children ran past laughing and playing, accidentally bumping into me and making me stumble. Careful. A hand caught me in time. Than. I looked up and saw a young man wearing a White Wolf King mask. Why does this voice sound so familiar? I tilted my head slightly and saw a familiar hair ribbon, Vice General Yang. He hesitated briefly, then nodded slightly and took off the mask. We sat by the shore watching the children set off fireworks, the fireworks sizzling as they fell onto the water, scattering into countless silver sparkles. It was you, wasn't it? He suddenly spoke up. Yeah, I knew what he meant. I heard he asked His Majesty to let him retire from the military. Are you going to reconcile with him? I silently watched the water surface. This kind of embarrassing family matter, I couldn't bring myself to talk about. That is fine, too. He forced a smile. Then I'll be the commanding general from now on. I've been working hard for a long time. He was a young lord of the Yang Duke's household. If Shu Ziyi gave up the commanding general position, barring any surprises, this responsibility would fall on him. I've been trying. I wonder if after all these years I've become even a little better than him. I always thought about catching up to him, being a little more like him, a little more steady. From calligraphy to spearmanship, I didn't want to lose to him in anything. But I was always one step behind. He was a competitive young man, so that is why he always compared himself to Shu Ziyi, right? Abandoning scholarly pursuits for martial arts must have brought a lot of hardship. Back then, Shu Ziyi was such a heaven-blessed genius, yet climbing to his current position still cost him a lot of suffering. The new wounds and old ailments on his body were too many to count. Have I become better than him? Or do I resemble him even a little? His voice took on a slight tremble. You're so much better than him. I wanted to pat his shoulder to comfort him like I used to in the northern wastes, but he grabbed my wrist. I looked up, staring at him blankly. He smiled bitterly, the corners of his eyes already red. Then why can't you look at me? Someone mischievous threw a stone into the center of the lake, splashing ripples. The moon rose. Even the gentle breeze swayed, blowing up white begonia petals all over the ground. I saw the tiny me in his eyes, cowardly and timid. I didn't want to go from one cage into another. You probably don't remember 4 years ago, the day of your wedding with him. My younger brother and I were playing around and bumped into your sedan chair. Even grandmother was scolding me. I was so flustered and scared, but you didn't care about the taboos, stepped down from the bridal sedan, helped me up, and told them not to scold me. They laughed at you for being from the countryside and not knowing the rules, but you didn't care, only asking if I got hurt from the bump. At that moment a gust of wind blew, and I saw your face beneath the bridal veil. A person can grow up in an instant. Do you understand, Chongyu? That marriage ribbon Shu Zi threw on the ground. I secretly picked it up. The good parts trimmed down were just enough to make a hair ribbon. Sometimes I dream too, dreaming that you gave this to me. I am just like my thoughts, filthy and despicable, unfit to be seen. I could never be open and honest in my life. Back then, when Shu Ziyi was on the battlefield, I didn't want to save him. I even hoped he would die in battle. But if he died, you would be heartbroken. Ridiculous, right? But I just couldn't bear to imagine you in grief. In this world, there are people like Sister Chongyu who throw themselves into love without hesitation, and there are people like me who are content just watching from afar. I stared at him blankly. After a long silence, I saw a mist veiling his eyes. The young man's figure seemed to carry 1,000 fathoms of loneliness, just like the morning fog on Laughing Corpse Mountain that never dispersed in the harsh winter. He noticed my gaze and simply took off his mask, placing it over my face so I couldn't see his disheveled state. I've said everything I needed to say. Now I'm going to be my grand general. I've had enough of Shoya and the others anyway. He pretended to be casual, tossing a stone into the water, trying to skip it beautifully. But the stone didn't cooperate at all. It didn't skip even once, sinking straight to the bottom of the lake. He bit his lower lip awkwardly, looking just as flustered and lost as he did. 4 years ago, I sighed. What a silly fool. Everything finally settled. It was a cloudless, sunny day, sweeping away the winter gloom. The green haze along the riverbank drifted all the way to the city gate. The divorce papers were signed and sealed. I packed my things, ready to leave the general's manor. Our young miss looks so much better with the hairstyle of an unmarried lady. Luju grinned as she pinned up my hair with flowers. How long has it been since our miss dressed up? A green-budded begonia hairpin, a moon-white ruse skirt, dark hair swept up in a slanted bun, dark brow color fading into the temples, a touch of crimson. You look just like a young lady fresh out of the boudoir. Stepping out the door, I saw the displeased old madam, the uneasy Shuyan, and the haggard Shu Ziyi. Shu Ziyi's eyes lit up for a moment, then quickly dimmed again. I gave them a bow, knowing that from here on, with mountains high and waters wide, we would likely never meet again. Shu Yuan carefully reached for my hand. "Auntie, you look so much prettier than before." The old madam was furious and cut Shu Yuan off without any courtesy. "Who is your auntie?" Shu Yuan froze, turning to look at Shu Ziyi. "Auntie's not coming back anymore." Shu Ziyi remained silent. Shu Yuan burst into tears with a wail, but was silenced by the old madam's sharp glare. Perhaps seeing me, despite being divorced, dressed so brightly, without the tearful, pitiful look of an abandoned wife, that is what upset her. But whether she was upset or not had nothing to do with me anymore. Zhao Ye nuzzled my neck affectionately, as if understanding that from now on, she wouldn't have to leave my side. "Shu Yuan, you need to study hard." I patted Shu Yuan's head. "You didn't pass the entrance exam last time, so you need to study hard and not disappoint your mother." Shu Yuan wiped away his tears, nodded, and said sorry in a small voice. I swung onto the horse, and Zhao Ye happily raised his front hooves. From the eyes of the concubines, I saw a trace of genuine envy. I turned my horse around, and Shu Ziyi spoke with a hoarse voice. "You don't have anything you want to say to me." I shook my head. "Shu Ziyi, let's part ways and each find our own happiness." What I could say, I had already written it all in that poem. "I'll come find you in the northern wastes." He still shouted at me unwillingly. "I'll make up for my mistakes." That was his business. It had nothing to do with me anymore. Once out the door, flowers bloomed against the walls. Birds chirped and twittered. Yang Zhaoxi was dressed in white, his hair tied with a red ribbon, He leaned against his silver spear with a grass stalk in his mouth, taking a nap under the flower wall, a full trellis of roses reflected on his shoulders, making his white clothes shine like snow, like a lazy cat. Joey snorted at him. He opened his eyes, meeting my gaze directly. His eyes lit up, and suddenly his face turned red. He hurriedly spat out the grass stalk. What a coincidence, in my opinion. It wasn't a coincidence at all. This was the only road out of the city. Together, I flashed him a smile. Sure. Yang Jiaoxi, true to his word, opened a charity house to take in the widows and orphans of fallen soldiers. I was thinking of going back to my old job at the stables, but he hurriedly said the charity house was short on hands. I thought about what I'd promised him before, and nodded. Having probably been seen through, he kept blushing and wouldn't look at me, took wrong turns 2 or 3 times, and Zhou ended up taking quite a few detours following him. Yang Jiaoxi, do you really know the way to the northern wastes? I was so exasperated, I laughed. I do. I really wonder how he managed to make a round trip between the northern wastes and the capital in just 7 days back then. Finally, when he took a wrong turn for the 19th time, I couldn't take it anymore. I let out a soft shout, and Zhao Ye dashed past him. I playfully slapped that white wolf mask of his from that night onto his head. Keep up, dummy! He was slightly stunned. Then suddenly smiled too, squeezed his horse's belly, and galloped after me. The sky was so blue it could seep water, the summer pastures of Corpse Smile Mountain stretched endlessly, and the vastness of heaven and earth intoxicated me. The northern wastes are vast, vast enough to ride horses for a lifetime, and never get tired of it. And the rest of life is long. Many things don't really need to be figured out right away, right?